You're losing. Right now, in this very moment, you're falling behind. Not because you made some catastrophic mistake, not because you lack talent or intelligence or opportunity. You're losing because of Tuesday, because of the breakfast you didn't think about, the 15 minutes you scrolled without noticing, the conversation you half listened to while your mind wandered somewhere else entirely, the small promise you made to yourself that you quietly abandoned before lunch. Tuesday doesn't feel important. It feels like filler, like the unremarkable space between the moments that actually matter. And that's precisely why you're losing. See, everyone's obsessed with Friday, with the big launch, the transformation, the breakthrough moment when everything finally clicks and life becomes what you always imagined it would be. You've been trained to worship the spectacular, the viral moment, the overnight success, the revolutionary change that comes crashing into your life like a tidal wave and reshapes everything in an instant. But here's the truth nobody wants you to know. Friday is a lie. Every extraordinary life you've ever admired was built on 10,000 Tuesdays nobody saw. The compound effect isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't trend on social media or make headlines. It just quietly, relentlessly, mathematically separates the top 1% from everyone else. And the beautiful, terrifying thing, it's already working, right now, in your life. The question isn't whether the compound effect is real. The question is whether it's working for you or against you. Because there's no neutral. Every small choice you make is either building the life you want or dismantling it. Every single one. The math doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't grade on effort. It simply compounds what you actually do. Most people will spend their entire lives waiting for permission to start, waiting for the perfect moment, the right opportunity, the magic formula that finally makes success easy. While they wait, a small group of people who understand what you're about to learn will move so far ahead that catching up becomes mathematically impossible. This isn't motivation. This is mechanics. What you're about to discover isn't new. It's been hiding in plain sight for centuries. But it's been camouflaged by the noise of quick fixes and life hacks and revolutionary systems that promise everything and deliver nothing. The compound effect is the only unfair advantage that's available to absolutely everyone, and almost nobody uses it. By the time you finish this journey, you'll see the invisible architecture beneath every success story you've ever heard. You'll understand why some people seem to effortlessly accelerate while others grind endlessly and get nowhere. And you'll have a choice. Keep living like everyone else, seduced by the spectacular, distracted by the urgent, wondering why nothing ever really changes? Or step into the invisible revolution, the one that starts right now, on a Tuesday.
There's an equation running your life that you've never seen. It's not written down anywhere. You weren't taught it in school. Your parents probably don't know it exists, but it's been calculating your future every single day since you were old enough to make choices. And right now, it's giving you exactly what you've earned. Not what you want, not what you deserve, what you've mathematically accumulated through the small, seemingly insignificant decisions you've made over and over again. Picture two people. Same age, same starting point, same opportunities, same intelligence. One makes choices that are just 5% better. Not 50%, not even 10, just 5. 5% healthier food choices, 5% more focused work, 5% better conversations, 5% more intentional use of time. The other person? They're not making terrible choices. They're not self-destructing. They're just 5% less intentional, 5% more distracted, 5% more comfortable. After a day, you couldn't tell them apart. The difference would be invisible, meaningless. After a week, still nothing. A month passes. Maybe you'd notice something subtle if you were really paying attention, but probably not. Here's where it gets interesting. After a year, the gap starts to show. One of them is noticeably sharper, healthier, more confident. The other is fine, comfortable, exactly where they were. After 5 years, they're living in different universes. One has built a career that excites them, relationships that energize them, a body they're proud of, opportunities that seem to appear out of nowhere. The other is stuck in the same patterns, wondering why life feels so hard, why success seems to come so easily to other people. After 10 years, the gap becomes permanent. This isn't theory. This is math. Researchers at Duke University discovered that about 40% of the actions you perform each day aren't actually decisions at all. They're habits, automated patterns your brain runs without conscious thought. 40%. That means nearly half of your life is on autopilot, and whatever is programmed into that autopilot is compounding every single day. If your default patterns are 5% above average, you're building momentum toward extraordinary. If they're 5% below, you're sliding backwards while standing still. The cruelest part, you won't feel it happening. Eating one unhealthy meal doesn't make you overweight. Skipping one workout doesn't destroy your fitness. Checking your phone one extra time doesn't ruin your focus. Having one unproductive day doesn't derail your career. So you do it again because nothing bad happened. And that's the trap. The compound effect works invisibly until suddenly it doesn't. Until one day you wake up and realize you're living a life you never consciously chose. You got there one small, insignificant choice at a time. You've seen this. You've watched people around you slowly drift into lives that don't fit them. Jobs they tolerate, relationships that drain them, bodies they're ashamed of, bank accounts that stress them out. And when you ask them how it happened, they genuinely don't know, because nothing dramatic occurred. No single catastrophic decision, just years of small choices that seemed harmless in the moment. But here's the part that changes everything. The same mathematics that quietly destroys also builds empires. Every person you admire who seems to have it all figured out isn't superhuman. They're not more talented. They don't have access to secret information. They simply understood this math before you did. They learned that small doesn't mean insignificant. They learned that consistency beats intensity. They learned that the boring, unglamorous, repetitive choices nobody sees are exactly what create the spectacular results everyone notices. Jeff Bezos didn't build Amazon in a day. He built it in 10,000 days of small decisions that compounded into an empire. Warren Buffett didn't become a billionaire through one brilliant investment. He became one through 70 years of consistent, disciplined choices that most people found boring. Your favorite author didn't write their masterpiece in a burst of inspiration. They wrote 200 words a day for 3 years while everyone else waited to feel motivated. The compound effect is democracy for success. It doesn't care about your background or your connections or your natural talent. It only cares about what you do repeatedly. And that should terrify you and excite you in equal measure. Because if you're not where you want to be right now, you built this. Not through one big mistake, but through 1,000 tiny ones you didn't think mattered. But also, you can build anything else, starting right now. The gap between where you are and where you want to be isn't actually that wide. It's not a dramatic transformation away. It's not some unreachable distance. It's 5%. 5% better choices, repeated daily, compounded over time. That's the equation they never taught you. That's the math running your life whether you acknowledge it or not. The only question is whether you're going to keep letting it run unconsciously, producing whatever random results your autopilot happens to generate, or whether you're going to take control of the inputs and let the math work for you instead of against you. Because once you see this equation, you can't unsee it. Every choice becomes visible. Every moment becomes meaningful. Every single day becomes an investment in a future that's being calculated right now. And the beautiful, unforgiving truth is this: the compound effect has already been working perfectly. It's time to decide what you wanted to build. Chapter 2: The Tyranny of the Spectacular. You've been lied to about how change works, not by any one person, not through some grand conspiracy, but through a cultural mythology so pervasive, so seductive, that you've probably never questioned it. The lie is this: transformation is dramatic. You've been taught to wait for the moment, the breakthrough, the epiphany that strikes like lightning and reorganizes your entire existence in an instant. The moment you finally get serious about your health, the day you launch the business, the conversation that saves the relationship, the decision that changes everything. And because you're waiting for that moment to feel big enough, important enough, dramatic enough, you miss the only moment that actually matters. This one. Right now. The boring, ordinary, unglamorous Tuesday afternoon when nothing special is happening and you don't feel particularly inspired and nobody's watching. That's where your life is actually built. But that's not what sells. That's not what goes viral. That's not what makes a good story at dinner parties. So instead, you consume an endless stream of before and after photos, rags to riches stories, dramatic transformation narratives where someone hits rock bottom and then, through sheer force of will and one powerful decision, completely reinvents themselves in 90 days. And every time you consume one of these stories, something insidious happens in your brain. You start to believe that's how it works, that change requires drama, that transformation needs to be visible, that unless you're making spectacular progress you can see and measure and share, you're not really changing at all. So, you wait. You wait until you have enough time to really commit, enough money to do it right, enough energy to give it everything. You wait for the perfect moment when the stars align and change finally feels possible. And while you wait, someone else is doing the thing you're planning to do. Not dramatically, not perfectly, not spectacularly, just consistently. They're not posting about it. They're not announcing it. They're not waiting for it to look impressive enough to share. They're just showing up every single day and doing the small thing that seems too insignificant to matter. Writing 200 words, walking 30 minutes, having one difficult conversation, making one sales call, choosing the healthier option one more time. And here's what they understand that you don't yet. Spectacular is the enemy of significant. Every moment you spend waiting for change to feel dramatic enough is a moment you're not compounding. Every day you delay because your progress doesn't look impressive enough is a day your competition is pulling further ahead. The compound effect doesn't reward the spectacular. It rewards the consistent. Nobody sees the writer who shows up every morning for 3 years, but everyone sees the best-selling book. Nobody notices the entrepreneur making 100 unglamorous phone calls, but everyone notices the thriving business. Nobody watches the athlete doing the same boring drills for a decade, but everyone watches the championship. You've been conditioned to worship the outcome and ignore the process, to celebrate the explosion and miss the 10,000 small accumulations of pressure that made it inevitable. And that conditioning is killing your potential. Because every time you dismiss a small action as insignificant, you're dismissing the only mechanism through which real change actually happens.
Researchers studying behavior change have found something fascinating. When people attempt dramatic transformations, the failure rate is astronomical.
New Year's resolutions, extreme diets, radical life overhauls. The more spectacular the change, the less likely it is to last. But when people make tiny, almost embarrassingly small adjustments, the success rate skyrockets. Not because small changes are easier, but because they're repeatable. And repetition is everything. You don't need to overhaul your entire life. You need to adjust your trajectory by 1 degree. That's it, 1 degree. After a day, you won't notice. After a week, still nothing. But after a year, you're in a completely different destination. After 5 years, you're not even in the same universe as the person who kept waiting for dramatic change. Think about a plane taking off from Los Angeles headed to New York. If the pilot adjusts a trajectory by just 1 degree south, passengers wouldn't notice. The flight would feel identical. But instead of landing in New York, they'd end up in Washington, D.C. 1 degree. Hundreds of miles of difference. That's your life. You don't need to become a different person overnight. You need to make one small adjustment to your daily trajectory and then protect it fiercely. Read 10 pages instead of scrolling for 10 minutes. Walk around the block instead of hitting snooze. Have the difficult conversation instead of avoiding it one more day. Choose water instead of soda. Invest 30 minutes in learning instead of watching. None of these actions will transform you today, or tomorrow, or even next month. But compounded over a year, over 5 years, you become unrecognizable. And here's the part nobody tells you, the part that makes this actually work. Small changes don't just compound mathematically, they compound psychologically. Every time you keep a small promise to yourself, you're not just making progress toward a goal, you're rebuilding your identity. You're proving to yourself that you're the kind of person who does what they say they'll do. That psychological compound is even more powerful than the practical one. Because once you see yourself as someone who follows through, everything changes. Your standards change, your choices change, your entire trajectory shifts. But you can't build that identity through dramatic gestures. You build it through small, repeated proof. One choice at a time, one day at a time, one unremarkable Tuesday at a time. The spectacular will come. The visible transformation. The moment everyone notices. The breakthrough that feels like magic. But it won't come because you waited for it. It will come because you stopped waiting and started compounding. And when it arrives, when people ask you how you did it, how you transformed so completely, you'll smile and realize something they can't see yet. There was no moment, no dramatic turning point, no spectacular decision. There were just 10,000 small ones that nobody noticed. That's the tyranny of the spectacular. It blinds you to the only path that actually works. But you're not blind anymore. You see it now. The question is, what you're going to do about it.
Chapter 3. When invisible becomes inevitable. There's a phase nobody warns you about. The phase where you're doing everything right and nothing is happening. You've made the decision, you've committed to the small, consistent actions, you're showing up every day, doing the boring work, making the choices that compound. And you feel exactly the same. You look in the mirror and see the same person. You check your bank account and see the same numbers. You evaluate your life and notice zero difference between who you are now and who you were a month ago. This is the phase where most people quit. Not because they lack discipline, not because they don't want it badly enough, but because they can't see what's happening beneath the surface. They think the compound effect is broken. They think they're the exception. They think maybe this works for other people, but not for them. So they stop. They abandon the process right before it would have proven itself. They give up 3 feet from gold and never know how close they actually were. And that's the tragedy. Because what they couldn't see is that everything was working perfectly, exactly as the math predicted. They just didn't understand the curve. Here's what actually happens when you start compounding small choices. At first, nothing. The results are so microscopic they're invisible to the naked eye. You're putting in effort and getting back what feels like emptiness. Days pass, still nothing visible. Weeks pass. Maybe you notice something tiny, but it could just be your imagination. You're not sure if it's real or if you're just desperate to see progress. This flatline phase is brutal. It's where your brain screams at you that this isn't working, that you're wasting your time, that you should try something else, something faster, something that produces visible results now. Your brain is lying to you. What's actually happening during this invisible phase is that you're building foundation. You're establishing neural pathways. You're creating the infrastructure that will eventually support exponential growth. Think of it like pushing a flywheel. At first, it takes enormous effort to move it even slightly. You're straining, pushing, giving everything you have, and it barely budges. Someone watching wouldn't even be able to tell you're making progress. But with each push, you're adding momentum. Microscopic amounts, invisible accumulations. And then, after enough pushes, after enough invisible effort, something shifts. The flywheel starts moving on its own. Each push now produces visible movement, then dramatic movement. Then it's spinning so fast that stopping it would be harder than keeping it going. That's the compound effect curve. Flat, flat, flat. Then suddenly, explosive. But here's the critical part. The exponential growth phase, the part everyone sees and celebrates, is only possible because of the invisible phase nobody witnessed. You can't skip to the explosion. You have to earn it through the flat line. Researchers studying habit formation found that it takes an average of 66 days for a new behavior to become automatic. Not 21 days, like the myth suggests. 66. That's over 2 months of showing up before your brain stops resisting, before the action becomes easier than not doing it, before you've built enough momentum that continuing is actually the path of least resistance. Most people quit around day 19, right when they've invested just enough to feel frustrated, but not enough to see results. They think they're cutting their losses. They're actually abandoning their investment right before it would have paid off. You've done this. Everyone has. You started something with genuine intention, gave it a few weeks, saw no dramatic results, and moved on to the next thing. And every time you did that, you reset the compound clock back to zero.
The people who win aren't more talented than you. They're not more disciplined. They're not superhuman. They just understand that invisible doesn't mean ineffective. They trust the math when their emotions are screaming at them to quit. They keep pushing the flywheel when their brain insists nothing is happening. They protect the process during the phase when the process looks like it's failing. And then one day, seemingly out of nowhere, everything changes. The business that struggled for 2 years suddenly takes off. The body that showed no visible change for months suddenly transforms. The skill that felt impossible suddenly clicks. The relationship that required constant effort suddenly flows. To everyone watching, it looks like an overnight success, a sudden breakthrough, lucky timing. To the person who lived it, it's the most predictable thing in the world, because they saw what was happening beneath the surface. They trusted the invisible accumulation. They understood that the flat line wasn't failure, it was preparation. There's a phenomenon in nature called the bamboo effect. When you plant Chinese bamboo, you water it and care for it every single day.
And for 5 years, nothing happens. No visible growth, just daily effort with no apparent return. Then in the 6th year, it grows 90 feet in 6 weeks. The question is, did it grow 90 feet in 6 weeks? Or did it grow 90 feet in 6 years? It spent 5 years building a root system strong enough to support explosive growth. The growth was always happening, it just wasn't visible. Your life works the same way. Every day you show up and do the small thing that seems insignificant, you're building roots. You're creating capacity. You're establishing the foundation that will eventually support the growth everyone will notice. But only if you don't quit during the invisible phase. This is where you separate yourself from the 99%. Not through talent, not through luck, through the simple, unglamorous willingness to keep going when you can't see evidence that it's working. You have to make peace with the invisible phase. You have to accept that growth doesn't happen linearly, that effort and results aren't perfectly correlated in the short term. You have to trust the compound curve. Do the math right now. Think about one small action you could take every day, something so small it seems almost pointless. Reading 10 pages, doing 10 push-ups, saving $5, learning one new thing. Now imagine doing that every single day for a year. Don't imagine doing it perfectly, just consistently. What would that compound into? Now imagine 5 years, 10 years. The number becomes absurd. Reading 10 pages a day is 36 books a year. That's 360 books in a decade. You would become one of the most knowledgeable people in your field, not through dramatic study sessions, through 10 boring pages a day. 10 push-ups a day doesn't sound impressive, but it's 3,675 push-ups a year. Your body would transform, not through intense workout programs, through 10 unremarkable push-ups a day. This is the math they don't teach you. Small multiplied by consistent equals extraordinary. But you have to survive the invisible phase. You have to push the flywheel when it barely moves. You have to water the bamboo when nothing's growing. You have to trust the process when the process looks broken. Because here's the truth that changes everything. The invisible phase isn't wasted time. It's the most important time. It's where you become the person capable of handling the success that's coming. It's where you build the character, the discipline, the identity that will sustain the exponential phase. If the results came immediately, you wouldn't be ready for them. You'd be the lottery winner who's bankrupt in 3 years, the overnight success who flames out just as quickly. The invisible phase is building you, not just your results. And right now, in this moment, you're either in the invisible phase of something extraordinary or you're waiting for something extraordinary to begin. The difference is everything. So when you wake up tomorrow and do the small thing and see no immediate results, remember this. The flat line isn't failure. It's proof the process is working exactly as it should. Keep pushing. Keep watering. Keep trusting. Because invisible is just the first phase of inevitable. And your exponential is coming.
Chapter 4. The Architecture of Small. You already know how to fail spectacularly. You've tried the extreme diet that lasted 4 days, the ambitious morning routine that fell apart by Tuesday, the business plan that never made it past the first obstacle, the relationship conversation you rehearsed perfectly and delivered terribly. Big, dramatic changes feel powerful when you decide to make them. They feel like proof you're serious, like evidence you're finally ready to transform. But big changes have a fatal flaw. They require a version of you that doesn't exist yet. You're trying to run a marathon with a body that hasn't trained, Build a business with a mind that hasn't learned discipline. Transform a relationship with communication skills you haven't developed. And when you inevitably can't sustain it, when the gap between who you are and who you need to be becomes too painful, you collapse back into old patterns. Then you blame yourself. You decide you lack willpower. You internalize failure. You add another piece of evidence to the case you're building against yourself. But the problem was never you. It was the strategy. You can't build a cathedral in a day, but you can lay one brick. And if you lay one brick every day with precision and care, eventually you'll look up and realize you've built something magnificent. That's the architecture of small. It's not sexy, it's not impressive, it won't get you likes or admiration or immediate validation, but it will get you somewhere no dramatic gesture ever could. To a life you actually built, not one you tried to leap into. Here's what most people miss. Small isn't just more sustainable than big, small is actually more effective. Your brain is wired to resist change. It's a survival mechanism. Consistency equals safety. Novelty equals potential danger. So when you try to make a massive change, your brain activates every defense mechanism it has. Resistance, procrastination, self-sabotage, all of it designed to protect you from the perceived threat of dramatic transformation. But your brain has a threshold, a level of change so small it doesn't trigger the alarm system. Psychologists call it the minimum viable change, the smallest possible action that still moves you forward. When you operate at this level, you're bypassing your brain's resistance entirely. You're sneaking past the guards, making progress that feels so insignificant your defense mechanisms don't even notice. And that's the secret. You're not trying to become a different person overnight. You're trying to become slightly different. So slightly that your identity doesn't fight back. So slightly that you can repeat it tomorrow without drama or willpower or motivation. Think about it like this. If I asked you to run a marathon tomorrow, your brain would immediately generate 1,000 reasons why that's impossible. You'd feel overwhelmed, resistant, defeated before you started. But if I asked you to walk to the end of the driveway, you'd do it without thinking. No resistance, no drama, just a simple action that requires almost no willpower. That's your starting point. Not the inspiring version, not the impressive version, the version that's so embarrassing to call it progress. Because here's what happens. When you complete that embarrassingly small action, something shifts in your brain. You've kept a promise to yourself. You've proven you're the kind of person who does what they say they'll do. That proof is more powerful than any motivation speech. It's identity-level change. And once you have one piece of evidence, you can build on it. Tomorrow, you walk to the end of the driveway and back, then around the block, then 2 blocks. Not because you're pushing yourself, because you're someone who walks. It's just what you do now. 6 months later, you're running. A year later, you're training for that marathon. Not through one dramatic decision, through 1,000 small ones that compounded into a new identity. This is the architecture. Small actions, repeated consistently, protected fiercely. But here's where people sabotage themselves. They start small and it works. And then they get excited and scale up too fast. They go from walking to the end of the driveway to trying to run 5 miles, and they break the pattern.
You have to resist that impulse. You have to protect the smallness even when it feels easy, especially when it feels easy. The goal in the beginning isn't progress, it's consistency. You're building the habit of showing up, the identity of being someone who keeps promises, the foundation that will eventually support exponential growth. Research on habit formation shows that the size of the habit matters far less than the consistency. Someone who does 2 push-ups every single day for a year will build a stronger exercise identity than someone who does an intense workout once a week. Because the 2 push-ups person is proving to themselves daily that they're someone who exercises. The intense workout person is proving they're someone who exercises when motivated. Identity beats intensity every single time. So here's your new operating system. Pick one area of life you want to transform. Just one, not 5, not everything. 1. Now identify the smallest possible action that moves you toward that transformation. Something so small you could do it on your worst day, on the day everything goes wrong, on the day you're sick and exhausted and overwhelmed. That's your minimum viable change. Want to write a book? Your minimum isn't writing a chapter, it's writing 1 sentence. Want to build a business? Your minimum isn't launching, it's making 1 phone call. Want to transform your health? Your minimum isn't a workout, it's putting on your workout clothes. Make it small enough that you can't fail, small enough that you can't talk yourself out of it, small enough that you run out of excuses. And then do it every single day. No exceptions, no negotiations. Not because that small action is going to change your life, because the pattern of showing up is going to change your identity. And once your identity changes, everything else follows. You'll naturally start doing more, not through willpower, through alignment, because you're becoming the kind of person who does these things. It's not effort anymore, it's just who you are. But you can't skip to that phase. You have to earn it through the small, through the boring, through the repetition that seems pointless until suddenly it isn't. There's a stonemason who was once asked how he carved such beautiful sculptures. He said, "I just remove everything that isn't the sculpture." That's what you're doing with small actions. You're removing everything that isn't the person you're becoming. 1 tiny choice at a time, 1 daily decision at a time. You're not adding discipline, you're removing the gap between who you are and who you're capable of being. And the beautiful part? You already know how to do small. You do it every day. You just do it unconsciously in ways that compound in the wrong direction. Scrolling for 5 minutes, hitting snooze, choosing the convenient option over the right one, having the easier conversation instead of the necessary one. You're already an expert at small. You've just been using it against yourself. Now you're going to redirect it. Same mechanism, different direction. Same daily repetition, different outcome. Start tomorrow. Don't wait for Monday. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you feel ready. Pick your minimum viable change. Do it. Then do it again the next day. Don't track your progress. Don't measure your results. Don't evaluate whether it's working. Just protect the pattern. For 30 days, for 60 days, for however long it takes until it becomes automatic. And then one day, without even noticing exactly when it happened, you'll look around and realize you're living a different life. Not because of 1 spectacular change, because of 1,000 small ones that built something spectacular. That's the architecture. Simple, boring, unglamorous, absolutely unstoppable. And it starts right now, with something small.
Chapter 5. Your Secret Opponent. There's someone working against you every single day. Someone who knows exactly how to sabotage your progress, who understands your weaknesses better than anyone, who can predict with perfect accuracy which moments you'll be most vulnerable. This opponent never sleeps, never takes a day off, never stops looking for opportunities to derail everything you're building. And the worst part? You invite them in. You give them power. You listen to their advice like it's wisdom instead of what it actually is: sabotage. This opponent isn't external. It's not your circumstances or your competition or the economy or bad luck. It's your environment.
The invisible architecture of choices, triggers, cues, and defaults that surround you every moment of every day. The context you swim in so constantly, you've stopped noticing it's there. And right now, it's designed perfectly, just not for the life you want, for the life you currently have. Every part of your environment is optimized to keep you exactly where you are. Your phone sits in the same spot, calling to you with the same addictive pull. Your kitchen is arranged to make the unhealthy choice easier than the healthy one. Your schedule defaults to the path of least resistance. Your friend group reinforces the identity you're trying to outgrow. You think you're fighting a willpower battle. You're actually fighting an environment battle. And you're losing because you don't even realize you're in a fight. Here's the truth that will change everything. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And your systems are built into your environment. Show me your environment and I'll predict your future with terrifying accuracy. If your phone is the first thing you see when you wake up, I know you'll start your day reactive instead of intentional. If junk food is visible in your kitchen, I know you'll eat it. If your workspace is cluttered, I know your thinking will be too. If your friend group doesn't challenge you, I know you won't grow. None of this is judgment, it's just mechanics. Your brain is a prediction machine. It's constantly scanning your environment for cues about what to do next, and it defaults to the easiest option, the most familiar pattern, the path that requires the least cognitive effort. That's not laziness, that's biology. Your brain is trying to conserve energy for actual threats, so it automates everything it can. And what determines which actions get automated? Your environment. Stanford researcher B.J. Fogg spent decades studying behavior change and discovered something revolutionary. Motivation is unreliable. Willpower is a finite resource, but environment design is limitless. When you change your environment, you don't have to rely on willpower. You're not fighting yourself, you're removing the fight entirely. Think about it. Why do you eat popcorn at the movies? Not because you're hungry, because the environment cues the behavior. The smell, the sound, the association. Your brain doesn't even process it as a choice. It's just what you do in that context. That same mechanism is running your entire life. Your environment is cueing thousands of behaviors you think you're choosing, but you're actually just executing. And here's the part that should terrify you. Someone else designed most of your environment, not for your benefit, for theirs. Tech companies designed your phone's notification system to be addictive. Food companies designed your grocery store layout to maximize impulse purchases. Content platforms designed their algorithms to keep you scrolling. Advertisers designed their messaging to create dissatisfaction. Your environment has been weaponized against your goals by people who profit from your distraction, your consumption, your constant state of wanting. And you're trying to overcome that with willpower. It's not a fair fight. You can't win that way. But you can redesign the battlefield. When you take control of your environment, everything changes. Not because you become more disciplined, because discipline becomes unnecessary. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. You want to read more, so you remove the willpower requirement. You put a book on your pillow every morning when you make your bed. Now, when you're ready to sleep, you have to physically move the book. That 5-second interaction is enough to cue the behavior. You read one page, then two, then a chapter. You didn't become more disciplined, you remove the friction between intention and action. You want to eat healthier, so you redesign your kitchen. You put a fruit bowl on the counter where the junk food used to be. You pre-cut vegetables and put them at eye level in the fridge. You make the unhealthy options invisible or inconvenient.
Now, the healthy choice is the default, the easy option, the path of least resistance. You didn't develop superhuman willpower. You aligned your environment with your goals. You want to stop wasting time on your phone.
So you remove it from your bedroom. You delete the apps that steal your attention. You turn off all notifications except the essential ones. You make distraction harder than focus. You didn't overcome addiction through strength. You removed the trigger. This is the secret the top 1% understands. They're not more disciplined than you. They've designed better environments. Their default is your aspiration. Your default is their worst-case scenario. And the gap between those two realities has nothing to do with character. It's architecture. Look around right now. Seriously, stop and look at your immediate environment. What behaviors is it cueing? What actions is it making easy? What choices is it defaulting you toward? Is your environment designed for the person you want to become? Or is it optimized for the person you're trying to stop being? If you want to write, is there a writing space that calls to you? Or is your laptop buried under clutter, requiring 10 decisions before you can even start? If you want to work out, are your exercise clothes visible and ready? Or are they at the bottom of a drawer, creating friction you'll have to overcome with willpower? If you want to build deeper relationships, is your phone in another room during dinner? Or is it on the table, silently demanding attention every time it lights up? These aren't small details. They're the entire game. Every choice you make happens in a context, and that context is either supporting your compound effect or sabotaging it. Right now, take inventory. Write down the 3 most important goals you have, the things you genuinely want to build through the compound effect. Now audit your environment against each one. Be ruthless. Be honest. For each goal, ask, what in my current environment makes this easier? What makes it harder? Most people will find the same thing. Their environment is accidentally optimized for distraction, comfort, and maintaining the status quo. Not because they're self-destructive, because they've never thought about environment as a variable they can control. But you're thinking about it now, and that changes everything. Here's your new operating principle. Make the good behaviors obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. Make the bad behaviors invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying. You want to drink more water. Put a full glass on your desk every morning. Make it obvious. You want to stop mindless snacking. Put the junk food in the garage. Make it difficult. You want to practice an instrument. Leave it out on a stand, not in a case. Remove the friction. You want to stop scrolling before bed. Charge your phone in another room. Remove the temptation. This isn't complicated, but it's completely incompatible with how most people approach change. Most people try to change their behavior while leaving their environment exactly the same. Then they wonder why the behavior keeps reverting. It's like trying to swim upstream while everyone else flows with the current. You might make progress through sheer effort, but the moment you get tired, the current takes you right back to where you started. Stop swimming upstream. Redirect the current. Your environment should be your ally, not your opponent. It should make the compound effect inevitable, instead of exhausting. And here's the beautiful part. Once you redesign your environment, the changes stick. You're not relying on daily willpower. You're not battling yourself. You're just living in a space that naturally produces the behaviors you want. The person who keeps snacks out of sight doesn't need discipline every time they're hungry. They redesigned the choice architecture. The person who puts their phone in another room doesn't need willpower to avoid it. They removed the battle. This is how you win. Not through strength, through strategy. Spend the next 24 hours redesigning your environment for just one goal. Not all of them, just one. Remove every obstacle between you and the behavior you want to compound. Add friction to every behavior you want to eliminate. Make it so easy to do the right thing that not doing it feels harder. And then watch what happens. Watch how behaviors you've struggled with for years suddenly become effortless. Not because you changed, because your environment changed. Your secret opponent has been winning for too long. It's time to switch sides.
Design your environment. Control your context. Engineer your defaults. And let the compound effect do what it does best. Work for you instead of against you. Starting right now.
Chapter 6: The Momentum Principle. There's a moment that separates everyone who transforms from everyone who tries and fails. It's not the decision to start. Everyone makes that decision. It's not the first week of action. Most people manage that too. It's day 8, the day after the novelty wears off, the day after motivation fades, the day when the small action you committed to feels boring, pointless, and completely optional. Day 8 is when momentum dies, or when it's born. And which one happens determines everything that comes after. Most people don't understand momentum. They think it's something that happens to you, a fortunate circumstance, a stroke of luck, being in the zone or on a roll. They think momentum is the reward you get for doing things right, something that shows up once you've already succeeded. They're wrong. Momentum isn't the result. It's the strategy. It's not what happens when things are going well. It's what makes things go well in the first place. And it doesn't start when you feel good. It starts when you feel nothing, when the action seems meaningless, when every part of you wants to skip today because missing one day won't matter. That's when momentum is built, in the moments that feel insignificant. Here's what actually happens. Every time you show up when you don't feel like it, you're making a deposit in your momentum account. You're adding to an invisible force that will eventually carry you forward with less effort than staying still. But every time you skip, you're not just missing one action, you're making a withdrawal from that account. You're killing the momentum you've already built. And momentum, once lost, is expensive to rebuild. Think of it like pushing a car. Getting it moving from a complete stop requires enormous effort. You're straining, pushing with everything you have, barely moving it forward. But once it's rolling, maintaining that movement takes a fraction of the energy. And if you build enough momentum, it almost pushes itself. The tragedy is watching people push the car until it's almost rolling, then stop to catch their breath. And the car rolls backward. So they have to start from zero again. They do this over and over. Push, stop, roll back. Push, stop, roll back. And then they wonder why they never get anywhere. They're putting in effort, they're trying hard, but they're never building momentum because they keep breaking the pattern. You've done this. Everyone has. You start strong, make progress, feel good, then life happens. You miss a day, then 2, then a week, and when you finally come back, you're starting over, from zero, with none of the momentum you had built. And starting over feels so much harder than continuing would have been. So you quit, or you try a different approach, and the cycle repeats. The top 1% knows something you're about to learn. Momentum is everything, and protecting it matters more than perfecting it. You don't need to do the action perfectly, you just need to not break the chain. Jerry Seinfeld, one of the most successful comedians in history, was asked once about his secret to becoming such a great writer. He said he hung a calendar on his wall, and every day he wrote jokes, he put a big X through that day. His only job was to not break the chain, to keep the X's going. Some days he wrote brilliant material. Some days he wrote garbage. Didn't matter. The X was about showing up, not about the quality of the output. That chain was his momentum, and it made him unstoppable. Because here's what happens when you protect the pattern, when you refuse to break the chain even on the days it feels pointless. First, you build proof, evidence that you're the kind of person who keeps commitments. That matters more than any single result. Second, you bypass the restart cost. You never have to rebuild from zero. You're always moving forward, even if slowly. Third, you create compound momentum. Each day adds to the previous days. The pattern gets stronger, the behavior gets easier, the identity gets more solid. And fourth, you develop immunity to circumstances. Your momentum becomes stronger than your excuses. Most people operate backward.
They wait until they feel motivated to act. They let circumstances determine their behavior. They give themselves permission to break the pattern when life gets hard. And life is always getting hard, so their patterns are always breaking.
You can't build anything that way. You can't compound. You can't transform. You're always at the mercy of how you feel in the moment. Momentum reverses that equation. When you have momentum, action creates motivation, instead of waiting for motivation to create action. You don't feel like working out. You work out anyway. Halfway through, you feel great. You don't feel like writing. You write one sentence. 3 sentences later, you're in flow. The action creates the emotion, but only if you don't wait for the emotion first. This is the momentum principle. Show up especially when you don't want to. Protect the chain at all costs. Make the pattern more important than the performance. And here's how you actually do it. You need a non-negotiable minimum. This is different from your goal. Your goal might be to write 1,000 words. Your non-negotiable minimum is 1 sentence. Your goal might be a 30-minute workout. Your minimum is putting on your workout clothes. The minimum is what you do on your worst days. The days when everything goes wrong, when you're exhausted, when you're sick, when you're overwhelmed. On those days, you don't try to hit your goal. You hit your minimum. You keep the chain alive. Because the chain is more valuable than any single performance. The momentum is more powerful than any individual result. Most people abandon their goals on bad days because they can't hit their standard, so they do nothing, and nothing breaks the chain. But if you have a minimum, you can always keep the pattern alive. You can always make the deposit. You can always protect the momentum. And on good days, you'll naturally exceed the minimum, not through discipline, through momentum, because the pattern is established, the identity is solid, the chain is strong. Think about your compound goals right now, the behaviors you committed to. Do you have a non-negotiable minimum for each one? If you don't, you're one bad day away from breaking the chain, one unexpected crisis away from losing all your momentum. But if you do, you're unstoppable, because there's no circumstance that can prevent you from hitting your minimum. No excuse strong enough, no obstacle big enough. Your minimum might feel embarrassingly small. That's the point. It needs to be so small that you can't fail, so achievable that you run out of excuses. 1 push-up, 1 sentence, 1 minute, 1 page, 1 call. On good days, that 1 becomes 10, becomes 50, becomes a full session. On bad days, it stays at 1. And that's perfectly fine, because the 1 keeps you in the game. And staying in the game is everything. Here's what nobody tells you about momentum. Once you have it, once the chain is truly established, the behavior actually becomes harder to stop than to continue. You've experienced this in reverse. Once you break the chain, continuing feels impossible. But you've also experienced it forward. When you're deep in a pattern, when the streak is strong, breaking it feels wrong. Your brain starts to protect the pattern. It becomes part of your identity. You're not someone who's trying to write, you're a writer, because writers write every day, and you've proven it for 60 days straight. That identity shift is the entire point, and it only happens through protected momentum. So right now, make a decision. Pick your most important compound behavior, the one that will create the most transformation if you sustain it. Now, define your non-negotiable minimum. Make it so small you could do it on the worst day of your life. And then commit to the chain. Not for 30 days, not for 90 days. Just commit to not breaking it tomorrow. That's all momentum asks. 1 more day. 1 more link in the chain. 1 more deposit in the account. Do that tomorrow, then the next day, then the next. Don't focus on the streak number. Don't obsess over how long you can go. Just focus on today, on not breaking the chain today. And if you do break it, if life genuinely makes it impossible,
Don't restart from zero. Don't treat it like failure. Just start a new chain the next day, immediately. The biggest mistake people make after breaking a streak is waiting for Monday, for the next month, for the right moment to restart. That waiting costs you everything. It turns one broken link into a broken chain. It converts a minor setback into a major derailment. If you break the chain, you don't wait. You start a new one immediately. The same day if possible, the next day at the latest. That's how you protect momentum even through failure, not by being perfect, by refusing to stay stopped. This is the momentum principle. Simple, powerful, absolutely non-negotiable if you want to transform. Motivation starts action, but momentum sustains it. And sustained action, compounded over time, creates results that look like magic to everyone who doesn't understand the chain. Your chain starts tomorrow. Protect it like your future depends on it, because it does.
Chapter 7. Breaking the Flat Line. You're going to plateau. Not might, will. You're going to hit a point where you've been doing everything right, protecting your chain, building momentum, staying consistent, and your progress just stops. The compound effect that was working so beautifully suddenly seems broken. The results that were starting to show flatline. The momentum that felt unstoppable stalls. And in that moment, you're going to face the most dangerous temptation of the entire journey. The temptation to change strategies, to abandon the process that got you here and chase something new. Something that promises faster results, something that feels like progress because it's different. This is where 99% of people lose, not because they lack discipline, because they don't understand the plateau. They think the flat line means the process stopped working, that they've maxed out, that they need to do something bigger, more dramatic, more intense to break through. So they switch. They abandon the compound behaviors that were working and jump to the next shiny strategy. And in doing so, they reset their entire compound clock back to zero. They trade momentum for novelty, and they lose everything they built. But here's what's actually happening during the plateau, something most people never understand. The plateau isn't a sign that the compound effect stopped working. It's a sign that it's working exactly as designed. You're in the consolidation phase, the phase where your previous growth is being integrated, stabilized, and prepared for the next leap, where your body, your brain, your skills, your systems are all catching up to the progress you've made. Nothing appears to be happening on the surface, but beneath it, everything is reorganizing. Think about how a building is constructed. You can watch floors go up quickly once the foundation is set, but before that, you watch workers dig and dig and dig some more. For weeks, maybe months, it looks like nothing is being built. They're going down, not up, creating depth instead of height. And to someone who doesn't understand construction, it looks like wasted time. But that depth is what will eventually allow the building to go up. The deeper the foundation, the higher the structure can reach. Your plateau is foundation work, and if you abandon it because it doesn't look like progress, you'll never build anything that lasts. Here's what research on skill acquisition tells us. Progress doesn't happen linearly. It happens in waves. You make rapid gains, then you plateau. You integrate, then you leap forward again. Plateau, leap. Plateau, leap. The people who master any skill aren't the ones who avoid plateaus. They're the ones who understand them, who trust them, who keep showing up during them. Because the plateau is where amateurs quit and professionals are made. When you plateau, your brain is doing something remarkable. It's creating efficiency, taking the new behaviors and patterns you've been practicing and automating them, turning conscious effort into unconscious competence. That automation is what allows you to handle the next level of complexity. But automation takes time, repetition,
sustained practice even when it feels like nothing is changing. If you quit during the plateau, you never get the automation. You never build the foundation. You stay stuck at the surface level of every skill, every habit, every transformation. Always starting, never mastering. But there's another type of plateau, one that actually does require intervention. The false plateau. The one that happens not because you're consolidating, but because you've gotten comfortable. Because you're repeating the same actions, but you've stopped challenging yourself. You've found a sustainable rhythm, and you've stopped expanding it. This plateau is permanent unless you deliberately disrupt it. The true plateau requires patience and trust. The false plateau requires intentional escalation. And you need to know which one you're in, because the wrong response to either will sabotage everything. If you escalate during a true plateau, you'll burn out. You'll overtrain. You'll create stress your system can't integrate. You'll break momentum trying to force progress that needs time to develop. If you stay patient during a false plateau, you'll stagnate. You'll mistake comfort for consistency. You'll compound the same level of effort and wonder why you never reach the next level. So, how do you know which plateau you're in? Ask yourself these questions. Have you been pushing your edge recently, or have you settled into a comfortable routine? Are you still slightly uncomfortable during your compound actions, or have they become easy? If you're honest, you'll know. Your body knows. Your intuition knows. If you've been coasting, if you've found a sustainable pattern and stopped expanding it, you're in a false plateau. You need to add challenge. Not change strategies, just increase the difficulty of what's already working. If you've been running 1 mile every day for 6 months and you're not seeing improvement anymore, you don't need a new workout program. You need to run 1.5 miles, or run the same mile faster, or add hills. Same strategy, higher intensity.
If you've been writing 500 words every day and the quality has flatlined, you don't need a new writing method. You need to write 700 words, or write in a harder genre, or write with a deadline. Same habit, greater challenge. But if you've been genuinely pushing, if you're still uncomfortable, if you've recently increased intensity and now you're not seeing returns, you're in a true plateau. You're in consolidation. And the only thing you need to do is keep going. Same actions, same intensity. Trust the process. Give your system time to integrate what you've built. The plateau will break, not through force, through patience. This is one of the hardest concepts to internalize, because everything in our culture tells you that if you're not seeing immediate results, you need to change something. Try harder, do more, switch it up, shock your system, find a new approach. But compound growth doesn't work that way. It works through sustained, consistent pressure over time, and sometimes that pressure needs to settle before it can build again. Here's a principle that will save you years of wasted effort. Never change a working strategy during a plateau. Only adjust the intensity. If the strategy got you to the plateau, it can get you through it. You don't need a new strategy. You need to deepen the current one. And you need to outlast the discomfort of apparent stagnation. Because here's what happens when you do. When you protect the process during the plateau, when you resist the temptation to chase novelty, when you trust the consolidation phase, the breakthrough comes, and it's bigger than any incremental progress that came before it. You're not just slightly better, you're transformed. The skill clicks at a new level. The habit becomes effortless. The results compound visibly. All the invisible work you did during the plateau suddenly becomes obvious. And to everyone watching, it looks like an overnight success, like sudden talent, like you just got it. But you know the truth. You got it by refusing to quit when nothing seemed to be happening, by trusting the math when your emotions screamed at you to change course. Athletes call this phenomenon the wall. Runners hit it around mile 20 in a marathon.
Everything hurts, progress feels impossible, the finish line seems unreachable. Amateurs stop, or they slow down so much they might as well have stopped. Professionals know the wall is temporary, that if they just maintain pace, if they just keep moving forward through the discomfort, they'll break through to the other side. And on the other side is a second wind, a renewed energy, a sense of power they didn't have before the wall. Your plateau is the wall, and you're about to hit it in whatever you're compounding. Maybe you already have. When you do, remember this. The plateau is not evidence that the compound effect stopped working. It's evidence that it's working so well, you're being prepared for the next level. Your job isn't to change course. It's to hold course, to protect the pattern, to trust the process even when the process doesn't seem to be producing. Because the production is happening, just beneath the surface, in ways you can't see yet. And if you abandon it now, if you chase the illusion of faster progress somewhere else, you'll spend your entire life hitting plateaus and restarting. Never breaking through, never experiencing the exponential phase that only comes after you've earned it through the flat line. So here's your new relationship with the plateau. Expect it. Welcome it. Recognize it as proof you're doing something right. And when you're in it, when progress feels invisible, and every part of you wants to try something new, ask yourself one question. Is this a true plateau or a false one? Am I consolidating or coasting? Answer honestly, then act accordingly. Either increase intensity within your current strategy or hold steady and trust the timeline. But whatever you do, don't abandon the compound behaviors that got you here. Don't trade momentum for novelty. Don't reset to zero because zero feels like movement. You're not stuck. You're loading. You're building foundation. You're preparing for the breakthrough that's already forming beneath the surface. And when it comes, when the flat line finally breaks and you experience the next leap forward, you'll understand something profound. The plateau wasn't wasted time. It was the most important time. It was where you became someone capable of sustaining the success that's coming. Stay in it. Trust it. Protect the process. Your breakthrough is closer than you think.
Love what you're hearing? Hit that subscribe button and join our community of audiobook lovers. Your support helps us bring you more amazing stories. Chapter 8. The Decision Debt. There's a cost you're paying every single day that you've never calculated. It's not showing up on your bank statement, it's not visible in your schedule, but it's draining you faster than almost anything else in your life. It's called decision debt, and it's bankrupting your potential. Here's how it works. Every decision you make, no matter how small, costs you something. Mental energy, cognitive bandwidth, willpower. Call it whatever you want, but the resource is limited. And you're spending it on thousands of decisions that don't matter. What to wear, what to eat for breakfast, when to check email, which task to do first, whether to scroll or work, what to watch, when to sleep, whether to work out now or later. Each one feels insignificant. Each one costs almost nothing. But you're making hundreds of them every single day. And by the time you get to the decisions that actually matter, the ones that could change your life, you're running on fumes. You have no bandwidth left for the hard choice, the important conversation, the creative work, the strategic thinking, the behavior that compounds. So, you default. You take the easy path, you choose what's familiar, you procrastinate on what matters. Not because you lack discipline, because you've already spent all your decision-making energy on things that will be completely irrelevant a week from now. This is why the most successful people in the world seem to have the same boring routines, why they wear the same thing every day, why they eat the same breakfast, why their schedules are predictable to the point of being ritualistic.
They're not uncreative. They're strategic. They understand that every decision they eliminate is energy they get to invest in decisions that actually matter. Barack Obama wore only gray or blue suits as president. Steve Jobs wore the same black turtleneck. Mark Zuckerberg wears the same gray t-shirt. Not because they lack fashion sense, because they refuse to spend decision energy on things that don't compound. They've automated the trivial so they can focus on the vital. And you need to do the same thing, because right now you're bleeding decision energy on 1,000 tiny choices that are killing your ability to make the few big ones that actually transform your life. Think about your morning. How many decisions do you make before you even start your actual work? What time to wake up? Whether to hit snooze? What to wear? What to eat for breakfast? When to check email? Which task to do first? Whether to scroll or work? What to watch? When to sleep? Whether to work out now or later? If you're deciding all of these things fresh every single morning, you're starting your day already depleted. But if you decided them once and automated them forever, you're starting with a full tank, with all your decision energy available for what actually matters. This is the decision debt principle. Eliminate trivial decisions so you can invest in vital ones. And here's how you actually do it. You audit your day and identify every recurring decision that doesn't require creativity or strategic thinking. Then, you decide it once and automate it forever. Your morning routine becomes identical every day. Same wake time, same first action, same breakfast, same workout, same everything. Not because you're rigid, because you're protecting your most valuable resource. Your work schedule becomes blocked. Same tasks at the same times, same order of operations, same decision-making frameworks for recurring situations. You're not limiting your creativity, you're creating space for it by removing the noise. Your environment becomes optimized. Clothes laid out the night before, meals prepped in advance, workspace set up before you need it. Everything designed to reduce the number of micro decisions required. You're not being obsessive, you're being intentional about where you spend your finite decision-making capacity. Research by Roy Baumeister on ego depletion showed that willpower functions like a muscle. It gets fatigued with use, and every decision, no matter how small, uses some of it. That's why you can resist temptation easily in the morning, but struggle by evening. Why you can make good choices early in the day, but default to bad ones later. Why you start with discipline and end with Netflix. It's not that you're weak, it's that you've been making decisions all day and you're depleted. But here's the powerful part. If you eliminate unnecessary decisions, you don't deplete as quickly. You have reserves available when you actually need them. The person who decides what to eat for every meal fresh is making at least 3 significant decisions a day just about food. The person who meal preps on Sunday makes that decision once a week. Same outcome, completely different energy cost. The person who checks email randomly throughout the day is making dozens of micro decisions about when to check, what to respond to, what to ignore. The person who checks email twice a day at set times makes 2 decisions. Same communication handled, fraction of the cognitive load. This is how you create an unfair advantage, not by having more willpower, by needing less of it. You're designing a life where the right choices are automatic, where discipline isn't required because you've removed the decision entirely. And that freed up energy, you invest it in the compound behaviors that actually transform your life. The creative work that requires deep thinking, the difficult conversations that build relationships, the strategic decisions that grow your business, the learning that expands your capacity. These are the decisions that matter, the ones that compound, the ones that separate the top 1% from everyone else. But you can't make them well if you've already spent your decision energy choosing what to wear. So here's your assignment. For the next 24 hours, track every decision you make, every single one, from the moment you wake up to the moment you sleep. Just notice them. Don't try to change anything yet.
Just become aware of how many decisions you're making that could be automated. Tomorrow, look at your list. Circle every decision that recurs regularly and doesn't require creative thinking or strategic analysis. Those are your decision debt items, the ones costing you energy without creating value. Now, decide them once. Create a default. Build a system. Automate the choice. Maybe your morning routine becomes completely standardized. Same wake time, same first hour, same breakfast, same everything. Maybe your work blocks become scheduled. Same tasks at the same times, same priority system, same evaluation framework. Maybe your meals become planned. Same grocery list, same prep schedule, same default options. The specifics don't matter. What matters is that you stop spending decision energy on things that don't compound and start investing it in things that do. And here's what you'll notice. Almost immediately, you'll have more mental clarity, more creative capacity, more ability to do the hard things. Not because you suddenly developed more discipline, because you removed the 1,000 tiny decisions that were draining it. The people you think have superhuman willpower don't. They just have better systems. They've eliminated decision debt. They've automated their defaults. So the hard choices, the ones that actually matter, don't feel as hard because they're making them from a place of full capacity instead of depletion. That's the unfair advantage you're building. Not more willpower, less need for it. And as you eliminate decision debt, as you free up that cognitive bandwidth, something remarkable happens. You start seeing opportunities you were blind to before, making connections you couldn't make when you were depleted, creating solutions that require the kind of thinking you can only do when you're not mentally exhausted. Your compound behaviors become easier, not because they changed, because you have the energy to execute them consistently. This is decision architecture. This is how you build a life that works with your biology instead of against it. You're not trying to become more disciplined. You're designing a life that requires less discipline. You're not trying to make better decisions. You're eliminating the decisions that don't matter so you can invest everything in the ones that do. And that investment compounds faster than anything else you could do. Because the decisions that matter, made consistently from a place of full capacity, create exponential returns. While everyone else is depleted by noon, deciding whether to work out or rest, whether to do deep work or check email, whether to have the hard conversation or avoid it, you've already made those choices. Your energy goes to execution, to creativity, to building, to compounding. And 6 months from now, a year from now, the gap between you and everyone else will be absurd. Not because you worked harder, because you eliminated decision debt and invested the savings in what actually compounds. Start today. Audit your decisions. Eliminate the trivial. Automate your defaults. And watch what happens when you finally have the energy to invest in what actually matters. Your future self, operating from full capacity instead of depletion, will be unstoppable. And it starts with one simple choice: to stop choosing the same things over and over. Decide once, automate forever. That's how you win the decision game. Chapter 9. Designing your default. You think you're making choices, but most of the time, you're just executing defaults. The default is what happens when you're not paying attention, when you're tired, when you're stressed, when you're running on autopilot. It's the path your life takes when you're not actively steering it. And right now, your defaults are designing your future. Not your intentions, not your goals, not your occasional moments of inspiration. Your defaults. The question isn't whether you have defaults. Everyone does. The question is whether yours are building the life you want or dismantling it. Because here's the truth that changes everything. Your defaults will always win in the long run. When the motivation fades and the discipline wavers and life gets hard, you won't rise to the level of your goals. You'll fall to the level of your defaults. Show me someone's defaults, and I'll show you their future. Show me what they do automatically,
without thinking, when no one's watching, and I'll predict with terrifying accuracy where they'll be in 5 years. Not where they want to be, where they're actually going. Most people spend their entire lives trying to override bad defaults with willpower, trying to force themselves to make better choices, fighting against their own automatic behaviors. And they lose. Every single time. Because willpower is finite. Defaults are infinite. Willpower is a sprint. Defaults are a marathon. And the marathon always wins. But here's what the top 1% understands. You don't fight your defaults. You redesign them. You change what happens automatically so that the right choice becomes the easy choice. The healthy option becomes the convenient option. The productive behavior becomes the default behavior. And once your defaults are aligned with your goals, you don't need discipline anymore. You need the opposite. You'd need discipline to fail. Think about that. What if the life you wanted was the path of least resistance? What if doing the right thing was easier than doing the wrong thing? That's not fantasy. That's engineering. And you can build it starting right now. Your current defaults weren't chosen. They evolved. They formed through repetition, convenience, environment, and influence. Most of them were installed by accident, by other people, by companies that profit from your poor choices. You're running someone else's operating system, and it's optimized for their goals, not yours. But you can reprogram it. You can design new defaults that serve you instead of sabotage you. Here's how. First, you identify your current defaults. What do you do automatically in each area of your life? When you wake up, what's the first thing you reach for? When you're stressed, what do you default to? When you're bored, where does your attention go? When you get home from work, what's your automatic pattern? When you're hungry, what do you eat without thinking? When you have free time, how do you spend it by default? Write these down. Be brutally honest. These aren't your aspirations. These are your actual defaults, the things that happen when you're not consciously choosing. Now, evaluate them. Which defaults are compounding in the right direction? Which ones are building the life you want? And which ones are quietly destroying it? Most people will find that their defaults are accidentally optimized for comfort, distraction, and instant gratification. Not because they're weak, because those are the defaults modern life installs unless you actively override them. Your phone is designed to be your default for boredom. Junk food is designed to be your default for hunger. Scrolling is designed to be your default for free time. Avoidance is designed to be your default for discomfort. None of these defaults serve you, but they're running your life because you never designed alternatives. So here's what you do. For every destructive default, you design a replacement. Not a restriction, a replacement. You don't try to stop reaching for your phone first thing in the morning. You put a book next to your bed, so reaching for something is still the default, but the object has changed. You don't try to resist junk food when you're hungry. You prep healthy meals in advance, so eating is still easy, but the option has changed. You don't try to avoid scrolling through willpower. You delete the apps, so opening your phone doesn't trigger the pattern anymore. You're not fighting the default. You're redirecting it. This is the critical distinction. Most people try to eliminate bad defaults through restriction and discipline. And it works until it doesn't. Until they're tired, or stressed, or depleted, and the default wins. But when you replace a bad default with a good one, you're not relying on discipline. You're relying on the same automatic pattern, just pointed in a different direction. The energy it takes to reach for something in the morning is identical, whether that something is your phone or a book. The action is the same. The outcome is completely different. That's the power of designed defaults.
Now here's where it gets really interesting.
You don't just replace individual defaults. You design default sequences, chains of behavior that trigger automatically. When you wake up, you don't just do one thing. You follow a sequence, and that sequence is either building you or breaking you. Right now, your morning sequence might be alarm, snooze, phone, scroll, rush, stress, grab food, leave. That's a default sequence. You're not choosing it, you're executing it. But you could design a different one. Alarm, water, movement, journal, healthy breakfast, focused work. Same amount of time, completely different trajectory. And once that sequence becomes your default, once you've repeated it enough times that it's automatic, you don't need to think about it anymore. You just wake up and your life starts moving in the right direction. This is how you compound effortlessly. Not by making hundreds of good choices every day, by designing a few default sequences that automatically generate good choices. Your evening sequence determines your sleep quality, which determines your morning energy, which determines your entire day. Your work sequence determines your productivity, which determines your results, which determines your opportunities. These sequences are running your life right now. The question is whether they're running it well. Design them once, install them through repetition, then let them run automatically while you focus on higher-level decisions. Research on implementation intentions shows that when you create if-then plans, you're essentially installing defaults. If I wake up, then I drink water immediately. If it's 6 p.m., then I work out. If I'm stressed, then I take 10 deep breaths. If I finish dinner, then I go for a walk. You're not deciding each time. You've decided once and created a default response. And defaults are powerful because they work especially well when you're at your worst, when you're depleted, stressed, overwhelmed. That's when defaults take over. Most people have defaults that make their worst days even worse. They're stressed, so they default to junk food. They're overwhelmed, so they default to avoidance. They're tired, so they default to scrolling. Each default makes the problem worse, creates a downward spiral, compounds in the wrong direction. But if your defaults are designed well, your worst days still move you forward. You're stressed, so you default to a walk. You're overwhelmed, so you default to prioritizing. You're tired, so you default to sleep instead of screens. Your bad days become less destructive. Sometimes they even become productive. Not through heroic effort, through designed defaults. This is the unfair advantage. When everyone else's life falls apart during hard times, yours maintains forward momentum. Not because you're stronger, because your defaults are better. And here's the compounding effect. Good defaults create conditions that make other good defaults easier. When your morning default includes movement, you have more energy all day. When your evening default includes no screens before bed, you sleep better and wake up sharper. Each good default reinforces the others, creates an upward spiral, compounds in the right direction. Bad defaults do the opposite. Each one makes the next one harder, creates resistance, compounds friction. So the question isn't whether you should design your defaults. You already have defaults. They're already running. The question is whether you're going to take control of them or let them keep running on autopilot, producing whatever random outcomes they happen to generate. Here's your next step. Pick one area of life where your current default is sabotaging you. Just one. Maybe it's your morning. Maybe it's how you handle stress. Maybe it's what you do when you get home from work. Maybe it's how you spend your evenings. Identify the current default sequence, write it down. Then design a better one. Not a perfect one, just better. Now here's the critical part. You don't install a new default by trying hard. You install it through repetition in a specific context. You need a trigger, a specific environmental cue that starts the sequence. The trigger for your morning sequence is your alarm. The trigger for your evening sequence is arriving home. The trigger for your stress response is the first sign of overwhelm. When trigger happens, sequence begins. Every single time. No exceptions, no negotiations. For the first week, it will require conscious effort. You'll have to interrupt the old default and execute the new one deliberately. But around week 2, something shifts. The new sequence starts to feel familiar. Around week 4, it starts to feel natural. Around week 8, it becomes automatic. And once it's automatic, once it's truly a default, you've changed your life without needing to change yourself. The person with great defaults isn't more disciplined than you. They've just designed better automatic behaviors. Their mornings build momentum. Their evenings restore energy. Their stress responses are productive. Their free time compounds. All automatically. All by default. And that's what you're building. Not a life that requires constant heroic effort. A life where the right things happen automatically and the wrong things require effort. Where your defaults are your advantage. Where your autopilot is taking you exactly where you want to go. Start with one sequence, master it, install it completely, then move to the next. 6 months from now, you'll have half a dozen default sequences running automatically. Your mornings, your evenings, your work blocks, your stress responses, your health behaviors, your relationship patterns. All aligned, all automatic, all compounding. And your life won't look anything like it does now. Not because you transformed overnight, because you redesigned your defaults and let them transform you over time. That's the game, that's the strategy. That's how the top 1% operates. They don't fight their defaults, they design them.
Chapter 10. The Proximity Effect. You're not just compounding your own choices, you're compounding the choices of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Their habits, their standards, their language, their beliefs, their energy levels, their ambitions, their fears, their defaults. All of it is seeping into you, invisibly, constantly, whether you notice it or not. You think you're independent, that your choices are yours alone, that you're the sole author of your life. But you're not. You're porous, permeable, constantly absorbing the norms of whoever's closest to you. And right now, those norms are either lifting you or drowning you. This is the proximity effect, and it's more powerful than almost any other factor in determining whether your compound effect works for you or against you. Jim Rohn famously said, "You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." That's not metaphor. That's mathematics. Research on social contagion shows that behaviors spread through networks. If your friends gain weight, you're more likely to gain weight. If they get divorced, you're more likely to get divorced. If they're happy, you're more likely to be happy. But it goes deeper than that. Their standards become your standards. Their normal becomes your normal. If everyone around you works 8 hours and goes home, working 10 hours feels excessive. But if everyone around you works 12 hours, working 10 feels like slacking. If your friends eat fast food regularly, eating healthy feels restrictive. If your friends are all fit, being out of shape feels uncomfortable. If the people around you complain constantly, gratitude feels naive. If the people around you solve problems, complaining feels weak. You don't consciously choose to adopt these standards. They just become your baseline, your reference point, your sense of what's normal. And normal is everything, because you'll always regress toward normal, always drift back to what feels standard in your environment. That's why people who escape poverty and make money often end up broke again. Not because they're bad with money, because they return to the environment where broke is normal, and they unconsciously calibrate back to that standard. That's why people who lose weight often gain it back. They return to the social circle where their old weight was normal, and their behavior automatically adjusts. That's why people who try to level up their lives while maintaining the same relationships often fail. They're trying to become exceptional while surrounded by people for whom mediocre is the standard. You can't out-discipline your environment. You can't outwork the proximity effect.
The people around you create a gravitational pull that's stronger than your individual willpower. So, you have two choices: change your proximity or accept your current trajectory. There's no third option. You can't stay surrounded by people who normalize the behaviors you're trying to eliminate and expect to transform. The math doesn't work. This is the hardest truth in this entire book, because it means you might need to distance yourself from people you care about, people who love you, people who've been in your life for years. Not because they're bad people, but because they're on a different trajectory, and their gravitational pull is keeping you from yours. You can love someone and still recognize that spending time with them is incompatible with becoming who you need to become. That's not selfish. That's honest, and honesty is the only thing that compounds into lasting transformation. Look at your current proximity right now. The 5 people you spend the most time with, whether in person or digitally. The voices that fill your mind, the energy you're around most often. Are they ahead of you or behind you? Are they pushing you forward or holding you back? Are their standards higher than yours or lower? Are they building or complaining, creating or consuming, growing or stagnating, solving or blaming? Be ruthless in this evaluation, because your future depends on it. If the people closest to you are living the life you want, you're in the right proximity. Their behaviors will naturally pull you up. Their standards will become yours. Their normal will elevate you. But if they're not, if they're stuck where you're trying to escape, then every minute you spend with them is a minute you're compounding in the wrong direction. Not because they're teaching you bad things, because they're normalizing them, making them feel acceptable, standard, okay. And okay is the enemy of exceptional.
Here's what this looks like practically. If you're trying to build a business and your closest friends all have employee mindsets, every conversation will subtly reinforce doubt. They'll question why you're working so hard, why you're taking risks, why you can't just relax and be satisfied. Not because they want you to fail, because they're protecting their own worldview. Your success would challenge their choices, so they'll unconsciously pull you back toward their normal. If you're trying to get healthy and your closest relationships normalize unhealthy eating, you'll struggle forever. Every meal becomes a negotiation. Every healthy choice feels like a rejection of them. If you're trying to grow and everyone around you is uncomfortable, your growth will feel like betrayal. They'll call you changed. They'll say success is changing you. They'll make you feel guilty for wanting more. And most people, when faced with that pressure, choose their relationships over their transformation. They stay small to keep people comfortable. They dim their light to avoid standing out. They abandon their compound behaviors to fit back in. And they live with quiet resentment for the rest of their lives, wondering what they could have become if they'd had the courage to change their proximity. Don't be that person. You can't afford it. Here's what you do instead. You audit your proximity. You identify who's elevating you and who's anchoring you. Then you make hard choices. You increase proximity to the people who are ahead of you, who are on the path you want to be on, who normalize the standards you're trying to reach. And you decrease proximity to everyone else. Not with drama, not with declarations, just with distance. You stop volunteering your time, energy, and attention to relationships that aren't compounding in the right direction. This doesn't mean you cut people off or end friendships. It means you're intentional about where you invest your limited proximity. You can care about someone from a distance. You can wish them well without being in constant contact. You can love people without letting them set your standards. And as you create that distance, you fill the space with better proximity. You find people who are where you want to be. You join communities that normalize the behaviors you're trying to build. You consume content from people who challenge you instead of comfort you. You engineer your proximity like your life depends on it, because it does. There's a concept in physics called entrainment. When you place two pendulums near each other, they eventually sync up. They start swinging at the same rhythm without any direct connection. Your life works the same way. You entrain to whoever's closest.
Your energy syncs with theirs. Your standards calibrate to theirs. Your trajectory aligns with theirs. And you can't fight it through willpower. You can only fight it through distance. The people who transform their lives don't just change their behaviors. They change their proximity. They move closer to people who make the life they want feel normal. And from that new proximity, the transformation becomes inevitable, not through discipline, through osmosis. When you're surrounded by people who work hard, you work hard. When you're surrounded by people who solve problems, you solve problems. When you're surrounded by people who are building, you build. It's not inspiration, it's calibration. You're adjusting to the new normal, and the new normal is pulling you up instead of holding you back. But here's the challenge. Better proximity is harder to find than comfortable proximity. People who are ahead of you don't have time for people who aren't serious. They don't entertain excuses. They don't slow down for passengers. You have to earn proximity to better people. Through proof, through action, through results. You can't just show up and expect access to high performers. You have to become someone worth their proximity, someone who adds value, someone who matches their energy, someone who's serious about the same things they're serious about. That means you might spend time alone for a while, in the gap between old proximity and new proximity, where you've created distance from what was holding you back, but haven't yet earned access to what will pull you forward. That gap is uncomfortable, lonely sometimes. It's where you'll be tempted to go back, to reconnect with comfortable relationships, to accept familiar proximity. Don't. That gap is sacred. It's where you're becoming someone different, someone who will eventually attract different proximity. Stay in the gap. Use the solitude to build, to prove, to compound, and eventually the right proximity will find you. Because like attracts like. Your energy will match with energy that's on the same frequency. And when you find it, protect it. Proximity to the right people is the most valuable asset you have. More valuable than money, more valuable than time. Because proximity to the right people generates both. One conversation with someone who's 10 years ahead of you can save you 5 years of mistakes. One relationship with someone operating at a higher level can open doors you didn't know existed. But you can't access that while you're still investing all your proximity in people who are behind you. So make the hard choice. Audit your proximity. Increase distance from relationships that aren't compounding toward your goals. Increase proximity to people, communities, and environments that normalize the life you're trying to build. It will feel selfish at first. It will feel like betrayal sometimes. People will notice. They'll ask questions. They'll make you feel guilty. Let them. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your transformation is. And 6 months from now, when your life looks completely different, when you've compounded into someone unrecognizable, you'll understand something profound. It wasn't just your behaviors that changed, it was your proximity. And that changed everything.
Chapter 11. When Discipline Becomes Identity. There's a moment most people never reach. The moment when discipline stops being something you do and becomes something you are. When the compound behaviors you've been protecting aren't efforts anymore, they're just expressions of who you've become. When showing up isn't a battle, it's just what people like you do. This is the identity shift, and it's the difference between temporary change and permanent transformation. Everything you've built until now, all the small actions, the protected momentum, the designed defaults, they've been preparing you for this moment. The moment when you stop trying to be disciplined and start being the kind of person for whom discipline is natural. Most people never make this shift. They spend their entire lives white-knuckling behavior changes, always fighting themselves, always relying on willpower, always one bad day away from collapse. They think discipline is something you have or you don't, a character trait, a genetic lottery, something you're born with or without. But that's not how discipline works. Discipline isn't a trait, it's a skill. And like any skill, it's built through repetition until it becomes automatic. The difference is
the discipline doesn't just become automatic behavior, it becomes automatic identity. Here's what actually happens. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, every time you do the thing when you don't feel like it, every time you choose the hard right over the easy wrong, you're not just building a habit. You're building evidence, proof, a case file of who you actually are. And your brain is keeping score. It's watching what you do, not what you say. It's tracking your patterns, not your intentions. And eventually, after enough repetitions, after enough proof, your brain updates its model of who you are. You're no longer someone who's trying to be a writer. You're a writer, because writers write, and you've written every day for 90 days. The evidence is overwhelming. You're no longer someone who wishes they were fit. You're an athlete, because athletes move their bodies, and you've moved yours consistently for 6 months. The identity is earned. You're no longer someone who wishes they were disciplined. You're a disciplined person, because disciplined people keep commitments, and you've kept yours over and over and over. This identity shift is everything, because once your identity shifts, your behavior follows effortlessly. You don't have to convince a writer to write. They just do. It's who they are. You don't have to motivate an athlete to train. It's automatic, part of their identity. And you don't have to force a disciplined person to do hard things. Hard things are what they do. It's not effort. It's alignment. But here's what stops most people from reaching this identity shift. They quit before the identity forms. They do the behavior for a few weeks, maybe even a few months, but they're still operating from their old identity, still seeing themselves as someone who's trying to change, not someone who's already changed. And because the identity hasn't shifted yet, every action still feels like work, like effort, like something they have to force themselves to do. So when life gets hard, when motivation fades, when the newness wears off, they stop. Because they're still operating on willpower, and willpower runs out. They were 3 weeks away from the identity shift, from the moment when the behavior would have become effortless, when their brain would have updated its model of who they are. But they quit before the update completed. So they have to start over, and the cycle repeats. You can't afford to quit before the identity shift. This is the most critical phase of the entire compound effect, because once the identity shifts, once you truly see yourself as the person who does these things, relapse becomes almost impossible. Not because you have more discipline, because going back would require you to betray your identity, and your brain fights to maintain consistency with your self-image. Think about it. If you genuinely see yourself as a healthy person, eating junk food creates cognitive dissonance. It doesn't match who you are, so your brain naturally rejects it. If you genuinely see yourself as a professional, sloppy work feels wrong. It violates your identity, so you naturally maintain standards. If you genuinely see yourself as someone who keeps their word, breaking commitments is painful. It contradicts your self-concept, so you protect your promises. This is why identity-level change is permanent. You're not relying on discipline anymore. You're relying on consistency. And your brain craves consistency with your self-image more than almost anything else. But you have to build the identity first, through proof, through repetition, through evidence that overwhelms your old self-concept. Here's how long it actually takes. Research on identity formation suggests that it requires somewhere between 60 and 90 days of consistent behavior before your brain updates its model of who you are. Not 21 days like the habit myth suggests, 2 to 3 months of daily proof before the identity truly shifts. That means you're looking at 90 days of conscious effort, 90 days of showing up when you don't feel like it, 90 days of building evidence.
And then, around day 90, something remarkable happens. The effort disappears, not because the behavior got easier, because you became someone for whom that behavior is natural.
The writer at day 30 is still fighting resistance every morning. The writer at day 90 sits down and writes without thinking about it. Same action, different identity. The athlete at day 40 is still negotiating with themselves about whether to work out. The athlete at day 90 is already dressed and moving before their brain even processes it as a choice. Same behavior, different person. This is what you're building toward. Not just habits, not just results. A new identity, a new operating system, a new version of yourself for whom the compound behaviors are automatic. But you have to protect the process during those 90 days. You have to keep generating proof even when it feels pointless, even when the identity hasn't shifted yet, even when you still feel like the old version of yourself trying to change. Because your brain is watching, it's tracking, it's collecting evidence. And when the evidence becomes overwhelming, when the pattern has been repeated enough times, it will update. And when it does, everything changes. Here's what this looks like practically. You need to start thinking of yourself in present tense, not future tense. Not, I'm trying to become a runner, but I'm a runner. Even if you're only running 10 minutes a day, even if you're slow, even if you just started. Runners run. You run. Therefore, you're a runner. The evidence supports the identity, so claim it. Not, I want to be a business owner someday, but I'm an entrepreneur. Even if you haven't made $1 yet, even if you're just starting. Entrepreneurs build businesses. You're building a business. Therefore, you're an entrepreneur. Own the identity now. This isn't fake it till you make it. This is aligning your self-concept with your behavior. And that alignment accelerates the identity shift. When you call yourself a writer, you start making decisions like a writer. When you call yourself an athlete, you start thinking like an athlete. When you call yourself disciplined, you start acting from discipline instead of toward it. Language matters. How you describe yourself to yourself matters, because your brain listens to what you say and adjusts your behavior to match. So stop using qualifying language. Stop saying, I'm trying to, or I want to be, or I'm working on becoming. Start saying, I am. Present tense, definitive, identity level. And then behave in alignment with that identity every single day until the identity isn't an aspiration anymore, until it's just a fact. But here's the warning. Identity can shift in both directions. Just like you can build an empowering identity through positive proof, you can reinforce a limiting identity through negative proof. Every time you break a commitment to yourself, you're generating evidence that you're not the person you claim to be. Every time you choose the easy wrong over the hard right, you're building a case against your desired identity. And if you generate enough negative evidence, your brain will update your identity in the wrong direction. You'll stop seeing yourself as disciplined and start seeing yourself as someone who can't follow through. You'll stop seeing yourself as capable and start seeing yourself as someone who tries and fails. That negative identity shift is just as powerful as the positive one. It just compounds in the opposite direction. So you have to be vigilant about the evidence you're creating. Every action is a vote for the type of person you're becoming. Every choice is either building the identity you want or reinforcing the one you're trying to escape. Most people cast a mixed ballot. They vote for their new identity some days and their old identity other days, and their brain doesn't know which one is real. So the identity never fully shifts. They stay stuck in the middle, forever trying to change, but never actually becoming different. Don't do that. Cast a unanimous ballot. Vote for your new identity every single day. Make it so clear, so consistent, so overwhelming that your brain has no choice but to update. And when it does, when you wake up one day and realize you're not fighting yourself anymore, that you're not forcing behaviors that feel unnatural, that you've become the person you were trying to become, you'll understand something profound. Discipline was never the end goal.
It was the vehicle, the bridge between who you were and who you needed to become. And once you've crossed that bridge, once the identity is shifted, discipline doesn't feel like discipline anymore. It just feels like being yourself. That's the final phase of the compound effect, when the behaviors you've been building become expressions of identity instead of exercises and willpower. When you're not doing hard things, you're being the kind of person who does hard things. And there's a universe of difference between those two states. You're 90 days away from that shift. Maybe less if you've already started. Maybe more if you haven't committed fully yet. But it's coming. As long as you don't quit, as long as you keep generating proof, as long as you keep voting for the identity you want with every small choice you make. And when it arrives, when discipline becomes identity, you'll realize something that changes how you see everything. You were never broken. You were never lacking. You were never fundamentally undisciplined. You just hadn't built enough proof yet. You hadn't given your brain enough evidence to update its model of who you are. But now, you're building that evidence every single day, and the update is processing. Soon, you won't recognize yourself. Not because you became someone else, because you became who you actually were all along.
Chapter 12. The Compounding of Attention. You're reading these words right now, which means you're not doing anything else. You're not checking your phone, you're not thinking about your to-do list, you're not splitting your focus between multiple inputs. You're here, fully, completely, at least for this moment. And that makes you almost superhumanly rare, because attention, real attention, deep attention, sustained attention, has become the scarcest resource in the modern world. And it's the one resource that determines whether everything else you're building actually works. You can have perfect defaults, ideal proximity, strong identity, and flawless systems. But if you can't direct sustained attention toward what matters, none of it compounds. Because the compound effect doesn't just apply to actions, it applies to attention. Where you direct your focus consistently, over time, compounds into expertise, insight, creativity, and results that look like magic to everyone else. But fragmented attention compounds into nothing, or worse, into the illusion of productivity while you actually drift further from anything meaningful. Here's the reality you're living in. The average person's attention span has dropped to 8 seconds. Goldfish are at 9. You're losing a focus competition to a fish. Not because you're weak, because you're under attack. Every app, every platform, every device, every notification is engineered by teams of PhDs whose only job is to fracture your attention and keep it fractured. Because fragmented attention is profitable, it's consumable, it's controllable. Deep attention is dangerous, it's creative. It builds things that can't be monetized by distraction. So you're being trained, systematically and scientifically, to fragment, to split your focus, to constantly switch contexts, to never go deep on anything. And most people have surrendered completely. They check their phone every 4 minutes on average. They can't read for more than a few minutes without getting restless. They can't have a conversation without glancing at screens. They can't sit with their own thoughts for 30 seconds without reaching for a distraction. They think this is normal, that everyone's like this, that it's just how modern life works. But it's not normal. It's trained, and it's destroying their ability to compound anything meaningful. Because here's what deep work requires, what real learning requires, what creativity requires, what building anything significant requires: sustained attention. Not 5-minute bursts, not fragmented focus between distractions, sustained, uninterrupted, deep attention for extended periods. And if you can't do that anymore, if your attention has been so fragmented that you can't sustain focus for more than a few minutes, you can't compound. You can't write anything worth reading. You can't build anything worth having. You can't learn anything worth knowing. You can't create anything worth experiencing. Not because you lack talent, because you lack the attention to develop it. Cal Newport calls this deep work.
the ability to focus without distraction on cognitively demanding tasks. And you've shown that it's becoming both increasingly rare and increasingly valuable. The people who can still do deep work, who can still sustain attention for hours instead of minutes, have an almost unfair advantage. Not because they're smarter, because they can compound their cognitive effort. They can go deep enough to find insights that surface-level attention never reaches. They can build complexity, see patterns, make connections, create value that can't be automated or outsourced or replicated by someone scrolling while they work. But most people can't access that level anymore. They've been too thoroughly trained to fragment. Their attention muscle has atrophied. They've forgotten what it feels like to go deep. And the tragedy is they don't even realize what they've lost. They think they're still productive. They're busy all day. They're responding to things. They're consuming information, but they're not building anything. Not really. They're rearranging, reacting, consuming, but not creating. Not because they don't have time, because they don't have attention. So here's what you need to understand. If you're serious about the compound effect, if you actually want to build something significant, you need to reclaim your attention. Not just protect it, reclaim it. Because it's been stolen, fragmented, weaponized against you. And reclaiming it is going to feel uncomfortable at first because you've been conditioned to need the distraction, to crave the interruption, to seek the dopamine hit of the notification. Your brain has been rewired for fragmentation, and you're going to have to rewire it back. Here's how. You start by creating blocks of protected attention, time where your only job is to focus on one thing, nothing else. No phone, no notifications, no multitasking, no exceptions. Start small if you have to. 20 minutes of uninterrupted focus. Just 20 minutes where you do one thing and only one thing.
For most people, this will be excruciating at first. Your brain will scream for distraction. You'll feel anxious, restless. You'll convince yourself you need to check something, that this doesn't apply right now, that you'll focus deeply later. Don't listen. Sit in the discomfort. Feel the withdrawal. Because that's what it is. You're withdrawing from an addiction to distraction. And like any withdrawal, it gets worse before it gets better. But it does get better. After a week of 20-minute deep work blocks, you'll notice something. The anxiety decreases. The restlessness fades. You start to remember what it feels like to actually focus. Then you extend 30 minutes, 45, an hour, 90 minutes. Eventually, you rebuild the capacity for deep, sustained attention that you had before it was stolen from you. And when you reach that point, when you can focus deeply for 2, 3, 4 hours at a time, you'll have access to a type of work that most people can't even conceptualize anymore. You'll solve problems they can't solve, create things they can't create, learn things they can't learn, build things they can't build. Not because you're more talented, because you can apply sustained attention, and sustained attention compounds faster than anything else. 1 hour of deep work produces more value than 10 hours of distracted effort. Not slightly more, exponentially more. Because depth multiplies impact. Surface-level attention creates surface-level results. Deep attention creates breakthrough results. But here's the part most people miss. It's not just about the work blocks. It's about training your entire relationship with attention. You need to stop treating it like it's infinite. Like you can spend it carelessly on whatever grabs you and still have plenty left for what matters. Attention is finite. It's your most valuable resource. And every time you give it to something that doesn't compound, you're stealing it from something that could. Every notification you respond to, every scroll session you indulge, every context switch you allow, every distraction you entertain. Each one costs you, not just the time, the attention, the focus, the depth. And the cost compounds, not just in what you lose in that moment, but in how you train your brain. Every time you fragment your attention, you're strengthening the neural pathways of distraction, making it easier to fragment next time, harder to focus. You're compounding in the wrong direction, building a brain that can't sustain the attention required for meaningful work. So you have to be ruthless. You have to treat your attention like the scarce, valuable, irreplaceable resource it is. That means you eliminate notifications. Not just silence them, eliminate them. Turn them off completely except for the few that are genuinely urgent. That means you delete apps designed to fragment you. Social media, news, games, anything engineered to hijack your attention. That means you create physical barriers. Phone in another room, website blockers, environments designed for focus instead of distraction. That means you schedule attention the same way you schedule meetings. Deep work blocks that are non-negotiable. Sacred time where your only job is to focus. And it means you stop multitasking. Because multitasking is a lie. You can't actually do two cognitively demanding things at once. You can only switch rapidly between them. And every switch costs you. Context switching has been shown to reduce productivity by up to 40%. Not because you're doing less, because your brain needs time to refocus after each switch. So when you're trying to write while checking email, while listening to a podcast, while monitoring Slack, you're not being productive. You're training fragmentation. You're teaching your brain that sustained focus is unnecessary, that shallow attention is sufficient, that depth is optional, and your results will reflect that training. Shallow work, surface-level output. Nothing that couldn't be done by someone else doing the exact same fragmented dance. But when you commit to depth, when you protect your attention like it's the most valuable thing you have, when you create the conditions for sustained focus and then actually use them, everything changes. Your work becomes different, not just better. Different in kind. You produce insights that surprise you, solutions that weren't accessible at surface level, creations that couldn't exist without depth, and those results compound. Each deep work session makes the next one easier. Each breakthrough builds capacity for the next one. Each completed project built through sustained attention proves that you're capable of more. You're not just building work, you're building the ability to do work that matters. And that ability compounds into a career, a life, a legacy that most people can't even imagine anymore. Because they never reclaimed their attention. They never rebuilt the capacity for depth. They never stopped fragmenting long enough to discover what they're actually capable of when they focus. But you're different. You're reading this right now, which means you still have attention. You still can focus. You haven't lost it completely. You just need to protect it, reclaim it, compound it. Starting with your next deep work block. Tomorrow morning, 2 hours, 1 task, 0 distractions. See what you're capable of when you actually focus. Then, do it again the next day, and the next. Compound your attention the same way you're compounding everything else. And watch what becomes possible. Not someday, starting now.
Chapter 13. Calibrating your compass. You have been building momentum, protecting your chain, designing your defaults, reclaiming your attention, compounding in 1,000 small ways every single day. But there's a question you need to ask yourself right now. A question most people avoid until it's too late. Are you compounding in the right direction? Because here's the terrifying truth. The compound effect is completely neutral. It doesn't care about your goals. It doesn't judge your direction. It just amplifies whatever you're actually doing. You can be disciplined, consistent, focused, and relentless. You can have perfect systems and flawless execution. You can be compounding beautifully in the exact wrong direction. Building a business you'll hate. Developing skills that don't fulfill you. Climbing a ladder that's leaning against the wrong wall. Optimizing a life that doesn't actually align with who you are or what you value. And the cruel irony is that the better you get at the compound effect, the faster you'll arrive at a destination you never actually wanted to reach. This is why calibration matters. Why you can't just set a direction once and blindly compound forever. Why you need to regularly stop, evaluate, and make sure your daily actions are still aligned with your actual goals. Not the goals you inherited, not the goals society assigned you, not the goals that sound impressive when you say them out loud. Your actual goals. The ones that matter to you. The ones that reflect who you genuinely are and what you genuinely want. Most people never do this calibration. They pick a direction in their 20s, or they inherit one from their parents, or they follow the path that seems most obvious, and then they just compound. They get really good at moving in that direction. They build momentum. They make progress. They achieve milestones. And then one day, they wake up at 40 or 50, successful by every external measure, and realize they've built a life they don't actually want to live. They compounded perfectly. They just never calibrated. So they're wealthy but miserable, accomplished but empty, disciplined but disconnected from any sense of meaning or purpose. And the compound effect that built their success has become a prison, because now they're too invested to change, too far down the path to turn around, too committed to the momentum to redirect. Don't let that be you. Don't compound blindly. Calibrate regularly. Here's how. You need to create calibration moments, scheduled times where you stop executing and start evaluating, where you step back from the daily grind of compounding and ask bigger questions. Not constantly. You can't be in perpetual evaluation mode. That's just another form of procrastination. But regularly, intentionally, with genuine honesty. Once a quarter works well. Every 90 days, you create space to ask, is what I'm compounding still aligned with what I actually want? Not what I wanted 3 years ago, not what I think I should want. What I actually want, right now, based on who I am today, not who I was when I started. Because you're changing, you're growing, you're learning things about yourself, and the direction that was right for the person you were might not be right for the person you're becoming. That's not failure. That's evolution. And evolution requires calibration. Here are the questions you ask during calibration. Write them down. Answer them honestly, without justification or defense. First, if I keep compounding in my current direction for 5 more years, will I like where I end up? Not will I be successful, not will other people be impressed. Will I actually like that life? Will it fulfill me? Will it align with my values? If the answer is yes, keep going. You're calibrated. Your compound effect is working in the right direction. If the answer is no, or even, I'm not sure, you need to stop and figure out why. Because another 5 years of perfectly executed compounding in the wrong direction is 5 years you can't get back. Second, am I compounding because this is what I want, or because this is what I started? Momentum is powerful. It's one of your greatest assets, but it's also dangerous because momentum wants to continue. It resists change. It makes pivoting feel like failure. So you keep going even when the direction no longer serves you. Not because it's right, because it's easier than stopping. But sunk cost is a fallacy. The time you've already invested doesn't mean you have to keep investing. If the direction is wrong, every additional day of compounding is making the problem worse, not better. Better to pivot now than to compound 5 more years in the wrong direction and then have to pivot from an even more entrenched position. Third, am I compounding because this is what I want or because this is what I started? Momentum is powerful. It's one of your greatest assets, but it's also dangerous because momentum wants to continue. It resists change. It makes pivoting feel like failure. So you keep going even when the direction no longer serves you, not because it's right, but because it's easier than stopping. But sunk cost is a fallacy. The time you've already invested doesn't mean you have to keep investing. If the direction is wrong, every additional day of compounding is making the problem worse, not better. Better to pivot now than to compound 5 more years in the wrong direction and then have to pivot from an even more entrenched position.
There's no judgment in this. Trade-offs are inevitable, but they should be conscious. Are you sacrificing your health to build your business? Is that trade-off aligned with your actual values? Are you sacrificing relationships to build your career? Is that what you actually want, or is it just what's happening by default? Most people make these sacrifices unconsciously. They don't decide to neglect their health or their relationships. They just get so focused on one area that the others atrophy. And by the time they notice, the compound effect has created consequences that are hard to reverse. They've built a successful business and a failing body, an impressive career and a broken marriage, because they never calibrated, never asked if the sacrifice was worth it, never evaluated whether they were optimizing for the right things. Fourth, if I died today, would I be proud of what I compounded? This isn't morbid, it's clarifying, because death has a way of revealing what actually matters. The things you thought were important often aren't. The things you delayed become urgent. If you knew you only had one more year, would you keep compounding in your current direction? Would you keep optimizing the same things? Would you keep sacrificing the same way? Or would you realize you've been majoring in minors, optimizing metrics that don't actually matter, chasing goals that won't mean anything when you're looking back? This question cuts through all the noise, all the shoulds, all the external validation. It gets to what's actually true for you. And if your answer reveals misalignment, that's not a crisis. That's information, data you can use to recalibrate before it's too late. Fifth, am I compounding from fear or from desire? This might be the most important question, because the compound effect works the same way whether you're running towards something or running away from something. But the destination is completely different, and the experience along the way is completely different. If you're compounding because you're afraid of being poor, you'll build wealth, but you'll never feel secure. If you're compounding because you desire financial freedom, you'll know when you've arrived. If you're compounding because you're afraid of being irrelevant, you'll chase achievement forever without satisfaction. If you're compounding because you desire to create something meaningful, you'll find fulfillment in the building. Fear-based compounding creates success that feels empty. Desire-based compounding creates success that feels aligned. And you need to know which one is driving you, because if it's fear, you need to address the fear. Otherwise, no amount of compounding will ever be enough. These questions aren't comfortable. They're designed to surface misalignment, to reveal the gaps between what you're doing and what you actually want. And when you find those gaps, you have a choice. Ignore them and keep compounding in the same direction, hoping they'll resolve themselves, or adjust your trajectory now while the cost is still manageable. Most people choose the first option because changing direction feels like admitting failure, like wasting the investment they've already made. But the truly successful people, the ones who compound into lives they actually love, calibrate constantly. They're not married to their original direction, they're married to alignment. And when they discover misalignment, they pivot. Not dramatically, not by abandoning everything they've built, but by adjusting their trajectory by a few degrees. Remember the plane analogy. 1 degree of adjustment early creates a massive difference in destination. But you have to make the adjustment while you're still in flight. You can't wait until you land at the wrong airport and then try to change your destination. By then, the compound effect has locked you into consequences that are expensive to undo. So calibrate now, this week. Set aside 2 hours with no distractions, no phone, no interruptions, just you and these questions. Answer them honestly. Write down what comes up. Don't edit, don't justify, just observe what's true. And if you discover misalignment, don't panic. Don't throw away everything you've built, just make small adjustments. redirect your daily compound behaviors by a few degrees toward better alignment. Maybe that means adding a new compound behavior that serves a neglected area of your life. Maybe it means reducing emphasis on something you've been over-optimizing. Maybe it means pivoting your business model, your career path, your relationship priorities. The specifics will be unique to you, but the principle is universal. Compound with precision, not just intensity. Direction matters more than speed. And the only way to ensure your direction is right is to calibrate regularly, to check your compass, to make sure the mountain you're climbing is actually the one you want to summit. Because here's the final truth, you're going to reach the top. The compound effect guarantees it. You're too disciplined, too consistent, too focused not to. The only question is whether you'll look around and realize you climbed the right mountain. Don't leave that to chance. Don't discover the answer after it's too late to change course. Calibrate now and calibrate often. Make it part of your compound rhythm. Quarterly reviews where you ensure your daily actions still align with your actual goals. Because success without alignment is just another form of failure. It's just slower to recognize and harder to escape. You deserve better than that. You deserve to compound towards something that actually matters to you. Something that aligns with your values, your desires, your authentic self. Not the self you're supposed to be, the self you actually are. Calibrate your compass, make sure you're heading in the right direction, then compound relentlessly toward that destination. That's how you build a life you don't need to escape from, a success you don't resent, a future you're actually excited to arrive at, one calibrated compound decision at a time.
Chapter 14. The Unreasonable Advantage. You know the compound effect works. You've seen the math. You understand the mechanics. You've started building the behaviors. But there's one question still lingering, one doubt that surfaces when you're honest with yourself. Will it really be enough? Will small daily actions actually create the kind of extraordinary results you want? Will you really pull ahead of 99% of people just by being consistent? Yes, and here's why. Because 99% of people quit, not eventually, almost immediately. They start with enthusiasm. They commit to change. They build momentum for a week, maybe two. And then life happens. Motivation fades. The novelty wears off. And they stop. They tell themselves they'll restart on Monday. Monday comes and they're too busy. They'll start next month. Next month, they're too stressed. They'll start after the holidays, after the project, after things calm down. And things never calm down. So they never actually compound. They just perpetually intend to. Meanwhile, you're actually doing it, not perfectly, not spectacularly, just consistently. Day after day, week after week, month after month. And that consistency, that boring, unglamorous showing up, creates an advantage so profound it looks like luck to everyone who doesn't understand what's happening beneath the surface. You're not more talented than them. You're not smarter. You don't have secret information or special privileges. You just didn't quit. And in a world where 99% of people quit before the compound effect can work, not quitting is an unreasonable advantage. Think about any field, any goal, any transformation. What percentage of people who start actually sustain it for 90 days, for 6 months, for a year? The numbers are brutal. Gym memberships get abandoned by February. Business ideas get shelved after the first obstacle. Creative projects get forgotten after the first failure. Relationship work gets dropped after the first uncomfortable conversation. Not because people are lazy, because the compound effect doesn't produce visible results fast enough to compete with the dopamine hit of starting something new. So they chase novelty. They jump from strategy to strategy, book to book, system to system, always starting, never finishing, never compounding long enough for it to matter. But you're different. You understand that the starting line doesn't matter. Everyone crosses the starting line. What matters is who's still going at mile 20, at mile 90, at mile 300. And at each of those milestones, the number of people still compounding drops exponentially, making your advantage more unreasonable with every day you continue. At day 30, you're ahead of 80%. At day 90, you're ahead of 95%. At day 365, you're in a category so rare that comparison becomes irrelevant. Not because you did anything extraordinary, because you did the ordinary thing extraordinarily consistently. And consistency is the ultimate competitive advantage, because almost nobody can sustain it. Here's what this means practically. You don't need to be the best. You don't need to be the most talented. You don't need to have the perfect strategy. You just need to be the one who doesn't quit. The one who keeps going when everyone else stops. The one who protects the compound when everyone else abandons it for the next shiny object. Do that and you automatically win. Not by outperforming everyone, by outlasting them.
This is the unreasonable advantage, and it's available to you right now. Not because you're special, because you're willing to be consistent when everyone else demands to be impressive. But there's a second layer to this advantage, one that amplifies the first. It's called asymmetric returns. In most areas of life, effort and results are not linearly correlated. They're exponentially correlated, meaning the difference between good and great isn't proportional to the difference in effort. The writer who's 10% more consistent doesn't get 10% better results. They get 10 times better results because they're the one who finishes the book while everyone else is still working on it. The entrepreneur who compounds 10% longer doesn't build a business that's 10% bigger. They build one that's 10 times more valuable because they're still there when the exponential curve finally kicks in. The investor who stays in the market 10% longer doesn't make 10% more money. They capture the entire exponential phase that everyone else missed by pulling out too early. Small differences in consistency create massive differences in outcomes because compounding isn't linear, it's exponential. And exponential curves reward duration more than anything else. So, your unreasonable advantage isn't just that you don't quit. It's that by not quitting, you position yourself to capture asymmetric returns that only exist on the other side of when everyone else stopped. You're not just ahead. You're in a completely different game, playing by completely different rules, accessing opportunities that don't even exist for people who quit before the compound curve kicks in. And here's the beautiful part. None of this requires you to be superhuman. It just requires you to be consistent, to show up, to not quit, to protect your compound behaviors when everyone else is abandoning theirs. That's it. That's the entire strategy. And it's unreasonable precisely because it's so simple that people don't believe it works. They think there has to be more, a secret, a hack, a shortcut, something more complicated than just showing up every day and doing the thing. So they dismiss it. They chase complexity. They look for the magic formula. And they never discover that the magic was in the mundane all along. But you know better now. You understand that simple doesn't mean easy, that consistency is simple in concept but difficult in execution, that the compound effect works precisely because it's boring enough that most people won't do it. So here's your final realization.
your final mental shift, the one that cements the unreasonable advantage permanently. You're not competing with everyone. You're not trying to be in the top 1% of talent or intelligence or natural ability. You're just trying to be in the top 1% of people who don't quit, who keep compounding, who protect the process when the process doesn't seem to be working. And that's a much easier category to dominate because the entry requirement isn't talent. It's patience. It's not skill. It's consistency. It's not genius. It's showing up. And you can do that. You've been doing it. You're going to keep doing it. Not because it's easy, because you've decided that your future is worth more than your comfort right now. That decision, that commitment to consistency over intensity, to duration over drama, to compounding over quitting is your unreasonable advantage. And it's already working, right now. Even if you can't see it yet, even if the results haven't shown up visibly, even if you're still in the flatline phase, the compound is happening. The advantage is building. The gap between you and everyone who quit is widening. And 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, you're going to look back at this moment and realize something profound. This was when everything changed. Not when you achieved the goal, not when the results became visible, but when you made the decision to keep going when everyone else stopped. That's when you gained the unreasonable advantage. That's when you separated yourself from the 99%. Right here, right now. In this ordinary moment where nothing spectacular is happening and you're just deciding to continue. That decision is everything. Protect it. Honor it. Return to it every time you're tempted to quit. Because your unreasonable advantage isn't something you're waiting to receive, it's something you're building every single day you don't quit. And you're not quitting. Not today, not tomorrow, not when it gets hard, not when the results aren't visible yet, not when everyone else abandons their compound. You're the one who stays, who persists, who compounds, who trusts the math when emotions scream otherwise. And that makes you unreasonable, unrealistic, uncommonly successful. Not someday, starting right now.
Chapter 15. The Legacy Math. You're at the end of this journey, but you're at the beginning of something much bigger. Everything you've learned, everything you've committed to, everything you've started building through the compound effect, it's not just about you. It's about who you become, what you create, the impact you have, the example you set, the legacy you leave. And legacy isn't what most people think it is. It's not about being remembered. It's not about monuments or achievements that outlast you. It's not even about the big, visible contributions you make to the world. Legacy is what you compound into the lives of everyone you touch, every person you influence, every standard you set, every behavior you model, every possibility you prove. Your children will inherit your defaults, not your intentions. Your team will adopt your standards, not your advice. Your community will mirror your consistency, not your occasional inspiration. You're not just compounding your own life, you're compounding into everyone who's watching. And someone is always watching. When you show up on the days you don't feel like it, you're teaching someone else that motivation is optional, but commitment isn't. When you protect your standards when no one would notice if you let them slide, you're demonstrating that integrity isn't about who's watching, it's about who you are. When you keep going through the plateau, through the invisible phase, through the moments when nothing seems to be working, you're proving that the math works even when it doesn't feel like it. And that proof, that living example, compounds into other people's belief systems, into their sense of what's possible, into their willingness to try.
you become permission, living evidence that the compound effect isn't just theory, it's practical, that ordinary people can create extraordinary results, that consistency beats talent, that small actions matter. And when people see it work in your life, they start to believe it can work in theirs. Your compound effect becomes their compound effect. Your transformation inspires their transformation. That's legacy. Not what you leave behind when you die, what you multiply while you live. And here's the beautiful mathematics of it. When you teach someone else the compound effect, when you model it so clearly that they adopt it themselves, you've just multiplied your impact. One person compounding creates one extraordinary life. 2 people compounding create exponential impact. 10 people create a movement. 100 people change a community. 1,000 people change a culture. And it all starts with one person who decided to actually do it, to stop talking about change and start compounding it, to prove through daily action that the math works. That person can be you. That person is you, right now, whether you fully realize it yet or not. Because you've made it this far. You didn't just consume information and move on. You engaged with it, internalized it, started applying it. And that already makes you different, already puts you in a category that most people will never enter. Not because they can't, because they won't. They'll read and intend and plan and someday. But you're actually doing it. And that doing is the beginning of legacy. So here's what happens next. Not someday. In the next 24 hours. You're going to face a choice. Multiple choices, actually. Small moments where you could compound in the right direction or default to the easy path. And in those moments, you're going to remember everything you've learned here. The math, the mechanics, the identity shift, the unreasonable advantage. And you're going to choose to compound. Not because it's easy, not because you feel like it, not because anyone's watching. Because you've decided that your life is worth building intentionally, that your future is worth more than your comfort, that your legacy is worth protecting. And you're going to make that choice tomorrow too, and the day after that, and the day after that. Not all at once, not in some dramatic declaration, just one day at a time, one choice at a time, one small action that compounds. And 90 days from now, you're going to look back and barely recognize yourself. Not because you became someone else, because you became more fully yourself. The version that was always possible, but required proof to emerge. A year from now, people are going to start asking what changed, how you did it, what your secret is. And you're going to smile, because you'll know something they don't yet. That there is no secret. Just the compound effect. Just showing up. Just not quitting. But you'll also know they're not really ready to hear that, because it sounds too simple, too boring, too ordinary. So you'll just keep being the example, keep compounding, keep proving that the math works. And eventually, some of them will stop asking and start doing. And your legacy will multiply. 5 years from now, you'll be living a life that feels impossible from where you're standing today. Not because something magical happened, because you compounded. You built it, one boring, unglamorous, consistent day at a time. And the gap between you and everyone who started when you did, but quit along the way, will be so vast, it will look like luck, like talent, like privilege. But you'll know the truth. It was just math, applied consistently, protected fiercely, compounded relentlessly. 10 years from now, you'll realize something profound. The compound effect didn't just change your circumstances. It changed who you are, your identity, your standards, your defaults, your entire operating system. You're not the same person anymore. You're someone who keeps commitments, who protects their word, who shows up especially when it's hard, who trusts the process, who doesn't quit. And that identity is worth more than any achievement, because that identity creates infinite achievements. It's the foundation that supports everything else you'll ever build. But here's what I need you to understand right now, in this moment, before you close this chapter and move back into your life. Everything you've read is useless if you don't apply it. Every insight, every framework, every principle, it's all just information until it becomes action. And action doesn't happen by accident. It happens by decision, by commitment, by actually starting. Right now, not Monday, not next month, not when things calm down.
Today, with one small action, one compound behavior, one choice that votes for the identity you're building. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that you do it, that you start the chain, that you take the first step toward proving to yourself that this isn't just theory. Maybe you write the first sentence, make the first call, do the first push-up, save the first dollar, have the first difficult conversation. Whatever your compound behavior is, whatever you've decided matters most, do it today, right now if possible, within the next hour if not. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Don't wait until you have a complete plan. Don't wait until you feel ready. Just start. Messy, imperfect, uncertain. Start anyway. Because starting is how you activate everything you've learned. Starting is how theory becomes practice. Starting is how knowledge becomes transformation. And once you start, once you take that first action, the compound effect begins. Immediately, invisibly, inevitably. You won't see results today, or tomorrow, or probably even next week. But the math is working. The compound is building. The trajectory is shifting. And every day you continue, every day you protect the chain, every day you show up when you don't feel like it, you're adding to that compound, widening the gap, building the momentum, becoming the person. Until one day, not too far from now, you'll wake up and realize you're already living the life you're currently building toward. Not because it arrived suddenly, because you compounded your way into it so gradually you didn't notice the transition. And that's when you'll understand the full power of what you've learned. When you'll see, with absolute clarity, that the compound effect isn't just a strategy. It's a way of life. It's how you build everything that matters, not just wealth or fitness or success. Character, relationships, meaning, purpose, legacy. All of it compounds. All of it builds over time through small, consistent actions that seem insignificant in the moment but prove transformational in the aggregate. So this is where we part ways, where I stop speaking and you start doing, where information becomes transformation, where reading becomes living. You have everything you need: the knowledge, the frameworks, the understanding, the choice. What you do with it in the next 24 hours will tell you everything you need to know about where you'll be in the next 24 months. Not what you intend to do, what you actually do. Not what you plan, what you execute. Not what you think about, what you compound. And if you're honest with yourself, you already know what that first action is. You've known since the beginning. You've just been waiting for permission, for the right moment, for certainty. But permission comes from doing, not from waiting. The right moment is now. And certainty only comes after proof, never before. So stop waiting. Stop preparing. Stop planning the perfect approach. Just start. Right now. Today. This hour if you can. Do the thing. The small thing. The thing that compounds. And then wake up tomorrow and do it again. Not because it created visible results. Because you're someone who keeps commitments, because you're building an identity, because you understand the math. And the day after that, do it again. And the day after that. Not forever, just one day at a time. Just today. Always today. And somewhere in that continuous today, somewhere in that protected chain of small actions, you'll cross the threshold. From trying to being. From doing to becoming. From building a life to living it. And when you get there, when you look back at this moment, this decision,
this choice to actually start, you'll understand something that can only be understood in retrospect. This was the moment. Not when you achieved the goal, not when the results became visible, not when other people noticed, but right here, when you decided to trust the math, to honor the process, to compound consistently even when you couldn't see the evidence yet. This was when you gained the advantage, when you separated yourself from the 99%, when you became the person capable of creating the life you want. So go, close this chapter, step into your life, make the choice, take the action, start the chain, and never, ever quit. Not when it's hard, not when it's boring, not when the results aren't visible yet, not when everyone else stops. Keep going, keep compounding, keep building, keep becoming. Because you're not ahead of 99% of people because you're special. You're ahead because you didn't quit. And you're not quitting. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. That's the compound effect. That's your advantage. That's your legacy. Now go build it. One small action at a time, starting right now. The math is waiting. The compound is ready. Your future is already forming. All it needs is you, showing up every single day, no matter what. Are you ready? Good. Then it's time to begin.
Closing, the first day of forever. You're still here. That means something. It means you're not like everyone else who skims through information looking for the highlight reel, the shortcut, the magic bullet that doesn't exist. You stayed. You listened. You absorbed. And now you're standing at the edge of the most important decision you'll ever make. Not whether you understand the compound effect. You do. The math is clear. The mechanics are proven. The examples are everywhere. The decision is whether you'll actually live it. Because here's what happens next. You're going to close this audiobook and step back into your life. And your life is going to test you immediately. It's going to offer you the easy path, the comfortable choice, the default behavior you've been running for years. And in that moment, you'll have a choice. Honor what you know or return to what's familiar. Most people choose familiar. They finish the book inspired, they feel motivated, they genuinely intend to change. And then they encounter the first moment of resistance and they fold. Not dramatically, not consciously, they just defer. I'll start tomorrow. I'll begin after this project. I'll get serious next month. And tomorrow never comes. The project never ends. Next month, they're saying the same thing. But you're different. You've come this far. You've invested this time. You've absorbed this truth. And somewhere deep inside, you know you can't unhear what you've heard. You can't go back to believing that success is luck, that transformation requires drama, that small actions don't matter, that the compound effect is optional. You know better now. And knowing means you're responsible. Responsible for what you do with this knowledge. Responsible for whether it becomes transformation or just becomes another book you finished and forgot. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Not tomorrow, right now, before you press stop, before you move on to the next thing. Make one commitment. Just one. Not 5 goals, not a complete life overhaul. One single compound behavior that you'll protect for the next 90 days. Write it down. Say it out loud. Lock it in. Make it so specific that you can't negotiate with it. Make it so small that you can't fail at it. Make it so important that you won't abandon it. And then do it today. Right now if possible. Within the next hour if not. Not because that one action will transform your life. Because that one action will prove to yourself that you're the kind of person who does what they say they'll do. And that proof, that evidence, that's what starts the identity shift. That's what activates the compound effect. That's what separates you from the 99% who finish this audiobook and change nothing. You've spent hours listening to these words.
Don't let those hours compound into nothing. Let them compound into action, into momentum, into transformation. Because the compound effect doesn't care how much you know. It only responds to what you do, consistently, over time, without quitting. And you're capable of that. Not because you're special, not because you're more disciplined than everyone else, but because you've decided that your future is worth building intentionally. That decision is everything. It's the foundation, the starting point, the moment everything changes. Not when you achieve the goal, not when people notice, not when the results become visible. Right now, in this decision, in this commitment, in this first small action. This is your moment, your pivot point, your before and after. Everything you've been, everything you'll become, separated by one choice: to start, to commit, to compound. So make the choice, take the action, start the chain. And 90 days from now, when you're living proof that the compound effect works, when you've transformed in ways that surprise even you, remember this moment. This was when it began. Not with drama, not with perfection, not with ideal conditions. Just with one small action, protected fiercely, repeated daily, compounded relentlessly. That's all it takes. That's all it's ever taken. And now you know. So go, build, compound, become. Your extraordinary life is waiting for you. Not someday, not eventually. Right now, on the other side of this one decision, this one action, this one commitment. The math is ready. The process is proven. The path is clear. All that's missing from you is you. Showing up, starting now, never quitting. Are you ready? Then stop listening and start living. Your compound effect begins today.